Hey guys, you are watching Your Anime World. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku never met All Might and stayed quirkless. Here is short summary. In this alternate universe of Boku no Hero Academia, Midoriya Izuku never received One for All Might never met Midoriya Izuku. In a world where quirks are everything, Izuku grows up as one of the few quirkless people, facing the cruelty and indifference of a society obsessed with power. As UA's most promising heroes prepare to take over as the symbol of peace, All Might, Midoriya Izuku struggles to find his way in this society while protecting the only thing he has left. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. With the UA festival in full swing, it will be interesting to see how the students from the support department use their technological resources to shine in the hero arena. And, as always, we'll keep you informed on everything that happens. This was a special report on the evolution of support equipment in the world of heroes. Until next time. In the waiting room, before the sports festival began, I listened to the dialogues of the students in the support department, full of enthusiasm and nervousness. Each shared their ideas and presentations, all eager to impress the company's president and gain recognition for their creations. Look at this device I designed. It increases grip strength by 30%, one student exclaimed, holding up a pair of gloves with flashing lights that glowed brightly. That's great, but wait until you see what I have, another replied, showing off a propulsion harness that promised unmatched agility. As I listened to the enthusiastic dialogues around me, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of nostalgia. That vibrant energy, that desire to stand out and be recognized, was something I had dreamed of in my most innocent days. But now, in this waiting room, that emotion felt more distant, almost like an echo of the past. The student in the flashing gloves continued to speak, his voice filled with joy, as I immersed myself in my thoughts. I remembered the deal I had made with Melissa, a promise that had given me a glimmer of hope in the midst of my struggles. She had been understanding, even after everything that had happened. I promised to help her show off her creations, in exchange for her helping me raise funds for Eri. Not only did he need that money, but he also wanted to find a way to give him a brighter future. That day, as we talked, Melissa mentioned that All Might could take care of Eri. Yes, the very symbol of peace, the greatest hero of all, who had meant so much to me, that now he would be the one to take care of Eri while I was here at UA during the sports festival. The image of his face gave me some peace of mind. I knew that Eri would be safe with someone so formidable. In the midst of my thoughts, the excitement in the room brought me back to reality. I looked at my companions with a smile, although deep down my mind was still agitated. Everything is to help my sister, I said to myself, strengthening my determination. Eri was my only family and I would do whatever it took to ensure her happiness. As I looked around, I saw the passion on the faces of my peers, and even though their dreams were different from mine, they had a desire to make a difference. While I was only here as a guinea pig to test Melissa's new inventions, not that it bothered me, it was actually a choice I had made to earn money and help my sister. It was an opportunity that would allow me to fundraise, and that goal was the only thing that really mattered right now. Suddenly, the room was filled with an enthusiastic shout. Hatsume Mei, known for her inexhaustible energy, came in like a whirlwind. Her tousled hair and bright eyes reflected the excitement that enveloped her. Guys, I've created something amazing that will definitely impress everyone. His words were a mixture of promise and enthusiasm, and they quickly captured the attention of others. The students around her began to murmur and approach, full of curiosity about what she had designed. Hatsume had always had an innate ability to attract attention. His charisma and passion were contagious. You could feel the spark in the air, a mixture of excitement and intrigue. As I watched her, a part of me couldn't help but feel distant. Although the enthusiasm was palpable, I felt like a spectator on a stage that was not my own. They were excited to demonstrate their inventions and live in the moment. I, on the other hand, was only here to fulfill a duty, with the only hope that everything I did would benefit Eri. How long can I go on with this? I wondered, a gloomy thought flashing through my mind. I had spent so much time trying to be strong and protect Eri that I sometimes forgot what it was like to feel the simple pleasure of creating or participating in something without such a heavy purpose on my shoulders. As Hatsume showed off his latest inventions, his energetic voice echoed through the room, "Look at this. This device, with which I can fly for 10 minutes. His infectious laughter made others join in, laughing and clapping. But I was just smiling from a distance, watching his enthusiasm. Suddenly, a member of the school staff burst into the room, breaking the bubble of joy with his authoritative voice, "Listen, everyone. It's time to get ready to go. Form a line and get ready to show off your creations at the sports festival." Hearing those words, the energy in the room intensified. The students began to flail, adjusting to their costumes and making sure their devices were ready to be presented. There was an air of nervousness mixed with enthusiasm that was palpable in the atmosphere. Mingling with each other, they began to form a line, each with their invention in hand, ready to impress everyone. I looked around, feeling a little overwhelmed by the pressure of the impending presentation. My colleagues chatted with each other, sharing advice and supporting each other. Meanwhile, I stood on the sidelines, remembering why I was here, helping Eri and securing her future. "Ready, Midoriya?" a colleague asked me, approaching me with a smile. I nodded, trying to imitate his enthusiasm. "Yes, I'm ready," I replied, though my thoughts were still focused on Eri. As the line moved forward, I reminded myself that even though I wasn't there for the same reasons they were, I also had a purpose. Every step I took was one step closer to fulfilling my promise. With one last glance at Hatsume, who was still talking excitedly about her invention, I joined the line. The murmur of voices and the hum of anticipation filled the air as we all made our way to the stage. As I left, the spectacle that lay before my eyes astonished me. The stands were packed with spectators, their screams of excitement echoing like a deafening echo, combined with the glow of the cameras capturing every moment. Present Mike, with his usual energy, made a triumphant entrance, his sarcastic performances filling the atmosphere with an almost palpable emotion. But, as I smiled for the cameras, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. To me, this whole thing felt like a circus, where we were just the show, and the idea of being part of this show made me feel like a mere object of entertainment. However, I tried to calm down, keeping my thoughts to myself, while focusing on what really mattered. My gaze drifted to an elevated section of the stands, and there I saw her, Eri. The little girl was smiling widely, surrounded by some of the teachers, who also looked at her with affection. My heart raced to see her so happy. Even though I didn't hear her, I could feel her eyes shining with excitement. Knowing that she was there, quietly encouraging me, filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. However, the lack of All Might by his side made me tense. The void left by his absence felt overwhelming. Although I worried that I wasn't there to protect her, I forced myself to keep watching Eri. Despite the uneasiness it caused me, seeing her happiness made me focus my anger in another direction. With every smile and gesture, she reminded me to trust the heroes around her. Despite my doubts, it was essential to put aside my fears and give them a chance to show that they could take care of her. I didn't want my distrust to cloud Eri's joy, but a part of me couldn't help but feel the shadow of disappointment lurking in the back of my mind. And so, with a deep breath, I prepared to give my best in this sports festival, not only for me, but for her. This was a time to show what I was capable of, and I had to do it for Eri, for the only family I had left. With that thought in mind, my resolve solidified. Present Mike exclaimed. The great battle between young heroes who raise their swords every year. And these are the guys, right? The miraculous new stars who overcame the enemy attack with their hearts of steel. The Class 1A Hero Course. Shouts and applause filled the stadium as Class 1A was introduced, spectators cheering with an intensity that almost made the ground shake. He could feel the energy in the air, the fervor of the crowds excited to see the future heroes demonstrate their skills. However, I remained silent, watching from my position in the support department, emotionally distanced from the whole show. As the aspiring heroes entered the stage, I felt a deep disconnect from everything that was happening. I couldn't help but see this whole event as a brutish spectacle where the students were nothing more than puppets for the entertainment of the public and the media. I didn't care so much about recognition or glory. For me, the only thing that really mattered was in the stands, cheering me on from a distance. Eri. My breathing remained steady, forcing me to hold back any signs of discontent or discomfort. I told myself that I had to endure this scenario, all for her. Despite the tension in my body, I wasn't going to let anything throw me off center. Present Mike continued their energetic presentation, mentioning each class from the letter B to K, extolling the qualities of each one with their characteristic style. The ovations of the public resounded throughout the stadium, creating an atmosphere of excitement and expectation that enveloped everyone. All around me, students in the support department were sharing nervous, excited looks. The anticipation was palpable, almost contagious, but I remained distant. I tried to keep my mind calm, focusing solely on my goal, to earn money to help Eri. The rest was irrelevant. However, my thoughts were interrupted when I heard some comments near me. "We're just here to make the heroes look like the best," one student muttered, some resentment in his voice. Another nodded, reaffirming his opinion in a sour tone. "It's true, it's always the same. They treat us like we're just here to support, but we're never the center of attention." Those words resonated with me. I couldn't deny that there was some truth to those comments. The hero course always monopolized the spotlight, while the rest of us were relegated to secondary, almost invisible roles. But that didn't matter so much to me. I wasn't here for recognition or glory. My reasons were simpler and more personal, something that didn't need anyone's approval. Soon, all the students were gathered in front of Midnight, the referee of this sports festival. I couldn't help but wonder why an exhibitionist was in charge of this event. Had the heroes really lost one or another value of decency? The spectacle of this festival had always seemed a bit excessive to me, and seeing someone like her at the helm only reinforced that feeling. However, my attention was soon captured when Midnight, with a provocative smile, with her commanding presence, announced that it was time for the keynote speech, which would be given by the freshman who achieved the highest in the entrance exam, representing all freshmen. The air around me filled with palpable tension. Although I didn't care much about the event itself, this speech was an important moment for everyone. It would be a promise to the public, a declaration of the ideals that each student represented at that festival. My gaze swept across the field, watching my teammates, some excited, some nervous. I kept myself calm, focused only on what motivated me to be here. Besides, he knew perfectly well who it would be, a student from Class 1A, a representative of the classroom perhaps. But I didn't expect it. Midnight's words resonated clearly, representing freshmen, come up here to the front. Midoriya Izuku. Amazement hit me like a gust of wind. I thought, completely bewildered. He wasn't the kind of person they would choose for something like that. I did not seek prominence, or admiration, and much less did I see myself as the ideal representative of all. However, there was my name, floating in the air, as all eyes from my peers in the support department began to turn towards me. At the same time, the murmurs of the rest of the students at the festival felt like a rising tide behind me. "Who is that? Does anyone know him? I've never heard his name. What? Isn't it from the hero course?" The questions kept flowing, mixed with laughter and expressions of disbelief. Even someone else whispered dismissively, "How is someone unknown going to give the speech?" The bewilderment did not stop there. Present Mike, always so energetic, looked as perplexed as the rest. "Midoriya, did you read the heroine Midnight correctly?" he asked, with his microphone amplifying his doubts. It was at that moment that May shouted excitedly, calling everyone's attention, "Good for you, Green. You're famous. Come on, give your best speech." The energy of his voice echoed through the air, like a ray of sunshine amid the gray clouds of my uncertainty. Despite the warmth of their support, I didn't really feel ready to be the center of attention, much less give a speech that they hoped would be inspiring. But he knew he couldn't make a fool of himself in front of Eri. I forced myself to keep going, despite my stomach, and started walking towards the podium. As I advanced, the eyes began to fix on me. Murmurs grew around me, filling the air with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Is it him?" was heard in the crowd. I was expecting something more surprising. Another comment slipped in. "Look at him, he's using support team, a guy from the support department. I felt the warmth of their gazes, but I also sensed the anger of someone in particular, an energy that seemed to be directed at me. However, I decided to ignore both the comments and that unpleasant feeling. I knew I had to focus on what was coming. Finally, I reached the podium and climbed with hesitant steps. In front of the microphone, the world around me momentarily vanished. He could see everyone, as if they were shadows in the fog, curious looks, doubtful smiles, and some more full of disdain. I felt like a ghost, someone unknown in a place where bright and bold heroes were expected. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. For some reason, this couldn't compare to what I had experienced before. I had never spoken in public like this, and every word felt like a weight on my chest. As I wondered what I should say, a clear idea began to form in my mind. At the end of the day, I just had to be honest, express what I really thought about this moment. So, instead of trying to impress everyone with big speeches, I decided it was best to speak from my deepest sincerity. If you really want to be heroes, I began, my voice echoing into the microphone, don't become mediocre and hypocritical heroes who only seek attention and fame for their actions. A true hero does not act out of applause, but out of a sense of responsibility towards others. You are here because you chose this path, and you must remember what that means. The crowd began to murmur, some surprised, others intrigued. I felt the energy change in the air, as if my words were beginning to sink in. It was strange, but for the first time, it seemed like I was accomplishing more than just being invisible. I paused for a moment, seeking to visually connect with my peers. If you're just here for fame, to be admired, or to prove that you're better than others, then you're going to fail as heroes. Keep that in mind. Silence took over the space, and at that moment, I felt my message resonate with everyone present. He wasn't just talking about what it means to be a hero, he was talking about the very essence of what it means to be human, to have a purpose beyond oneself. After sharing those words, I turned my gaze to Midnight, who was looking at me with surprise and, perhaps, a little pride. That's all, teacher, I have nothing more to say, I said, feeling a mixture of relief as I stepped down from the podium. Suddenly, I heard a lot of applause erupt around me, louder than I had imagined. Although some were still muttering about my identity, others were commenting on each other, acknowledging my words approvingly. Confused, I asked, why are they clapping? Midnight answered me with a smile that lit up her face. I don't know exactly what you wanted to achieve with your words, but it seems that you inspired some to want to be better heroes. A nervous laugh welled up from me as I thought, how silly, since when do I inspire people? Despite my disbelief, the applause continued to ring in my ears, and everyone's attentive gaze made me feel as if I were under a spotlight. As I stepped down from the podium, the murmur of voices mingled with my thoughts. Some students exchanged opinions about my speech, and although I could not hear every word, I caught fragments of admiration and surprise. Can you believe it? He's a guy from the support department, and his words were deeper than I expected. I paused for a moment to reflect. Had he really inspired anyone? Was that possible? I couldn't stop questioning myself, so I tried to ignore the stares and headed to my place next to the students in the support department. However, a part of me couldn't help but think that, despite my misgivings, I had said something that really mattered. When I arrived at my place, I looked at Eri again in that part of the stadium, accompanied by the other heroes. His expression was one of pure joy, and his smile lit up his face. I felt a little lighter to see that I was much happier than before. Well, at least I managed to do something good here, I thought, feeling a warmth in my chest. Now let's start at once, Midnight said energetically, breaking the atmosphere of nervousness that was in the air. The first game will be to rank them, and this year, the first one will be an obstacle course. As she spoke, a giant screen lit up behind her, showing an impressive course full of challenges, walls to climb, traps to evade and platforms that moved. The murmurs among the students intensified, some excited and others nervous at the prospect of facing a physical challenge that would test their abilities. An obstacle course. I looked at the route behind Midnight and wondered how I was going to meet that challenge. The circular road seemed to be a 1-mile route, where there will be different types of obstacles. Thanks to all my training, I'm not a weak person athletically. I've worked hard to improve my skills, but I also have to remember that I don't have infinite stamina. I'll have to rely on the items Melissa gave me. Those devices could be the key to keeping me on my feet during the race and not falling exhausted before my time. As I approached the grand entrance that marked the starting line, I managed to see a large crowd of students grouping together, their faces reflecting anxieties and expectations. Some were smiling, others were looking determined. The atmosphere was electrifying. Honestly, I don't care if I have to win or prove that I'm some kind of hero. But I have to highlight a bit, since it was part of the deal I made with Melissa. This is for you, Eri, I thought, as the start signal echoed through the air. With each step, I got a little closer to my goal. Start. When I heard the teacher shouting and the whistle signaling the start, everyone immediately started running. However, just before I joined the frenzy, I stopped. The entrance seemed too narrow for a large number of students to move freely. The frustrated cries of my companions echoed through the air. Some were trying to push each other forward, but the space was so small that they felt trapped, like sardines in a can. As I watched the chaos around me, an idea began to form in my mind. I had to use the support items Melissa had given me, and I started thinking about how they could help me. Boots with magnetism might come in handy in some parts of the course, but right now, the key was in the net launcher on my wrist. Despite not having tried it before, I felt it was my best option. Suddenly, I noticed that the entrance was freezing quickly, and the feet of all the students were caught in a layer of ice. He recognized that technique. It was undoubtedly the work of Todoroki Shoto, the recommending student of the Heroes course. With his half-ice quirk, he had managed to create a formidable obstacle. Wasting no time, I jumped up at the wall, using the magnetism of my boots to cling to it. At that moment, I activated the net launcher on my wrist, aiming at the ceiling and firing the resistant thread. I threw myself upwards, avoiding the icy ground and the panic that was unleashed among my companions. When I got to the other side of the entrance, I noticed that there were several students from the hero course using their quirks as they ran down the ice-filled path. Some slid their feet nimbly, dodging obstacles with impressive dexterity, while others simply skated, trying to find their footing. The mix of skills and styles was amazing, I admit. I hope they aren't mediocre heroes, I thought as I continued to advance, my steps firm thanks to the boots. Looking ahead, I saw the tour unfold before me. I couldn't be left behind, so I decided I had to act fast. With adrenaline flowing in my veins, I focused and started running. With the ice under my feet, I was grateful to have the magnetic boots Melissa had given me. Running on that slippery surface wasn't as difficult for me as it was for many of the other students. Let's see what I can do. As the sports festival continued, some members of the HPSC, Hero Public Safety Commission, gathered in an observation room, watching the screens that displayed the event. The atmosphere was charged with comments and criticisms. Does Director Nezu really think it was a good idea to let the Quirkless student, Midoriya Izuku, give the opening speech? Questioned one of them, frowning as he pointed at the screen, instead of Bakugo Katsuki, who is clearly the best and has more potential. That decision was absurd. Another member nodded, adding, exactly. Bakugo is the favorite. Everyone expected him to be the one to inspire others, not this support department kid who doesn't even have a quirk. Who does he think he is to talk about what it means to be a hero? It's nonsense, snapped another, crossing his arms. What he said doesn't make sense. Talking about responsibility and heroism is easy when you're just a kid and don't have a quirk to back up your heroism. How can a child who can't do anything want to highlight what it really means to be a hero? Maybe it was a good speech, interjected a more cautious member, but his reality is very different. Heroes are strong and have exceptional abilities. What can a quirkless person contribute? It's an idealism that has no place in our society. Exactly, one of them retorted with disdain. Bakugo could have given an explosive speech, something that really resonated. Instead, we have Midoriya trying to be the hero of the story when it's clear he doesn't fit the mold. The conversation continued with a cynical tone, reflecting the disparity between what some considered necessary in a hero and what Midoriya truly represented. Meanwhile, on the screens, the young man they were discussing was constantly showcasing his skills, demonstrating agility and speed while using his support gear. Despite the challenges, Izuku was proving that he could exceed expectations with ingenuity and determination. His movements were agile, using the net launchers and his magnetic boots to navigate obstacles, and his strategy was clear. Each time it seemed he would fall or be overtaken, he found a way to get back up and move forward, leaving the spectators, both in the arena and in the observation room, with the sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary. "I admit he's quite skilled for his age," murmured one of the HPSC members, although his words were filled with disbelief. "But what if he miraculously makes it to the final event?" "What the hell are you talking about? That's impossible," replied another, laughing scornfully. "But if by some miracle he does, I know what to do to make him lose against the best Quirks," he first one said, smirking. They all laughed, knowing what their colleague was planning. The idea that a Quirkless student could compete against the best seemed ridiculous, and the superiority they felt was reflected in their laughter. As the cynical comments continued, Izuku, oblivious to the words of the HPSC members, focused on the competition, unaware that they were conspiring to humiliate him. From the stands reserved for professional heroes, Eri watched with admiration the large stadium, its huge screens projecting the images of students running, jumping and dodging obstacles in a competition full of energy and enthusiasm. However, her eyes were fixed on a single figure, her brother, Izuku. "It's great," Eri exclaimed, her voice barely containing the excitement as she watched Izuku move with agility and precision through the obstacle course. Despite the multitude of participants and the challenges he faced, he moved forward with unwavering determination. Every jump and every turn was a manifestation of the effort he had put into his training. Beside her, several professional heroes looked at her with a smile. Mirko, leaning on the back of her seat with her arms crossed, watched proudly. "He's doing a great job," she said, her tone full of admiration. "That boy has a natural talent for this." Vlad King, staring at the screen, nodded his head, his expression serious but full of approval. "He's determined. He could be a good leader." Hero Spine, who was sitting near Eri, spoke with his serious but affable tone. "If that kid continues like this, he could go very far in this test." Eri, with a shy smile, couldn't take her eyes off the screens. She felt a warmth in her chest as she watched her brother try so hard, every move of his resonating in her heart. "I'm happy for you, brother," she whispered, more to herself than to others, though her voice was charged with emotion. The heroes around her encouraged her to keep watching. Hawks, with his characteristic nonchalant air, leaned over to her and said with a sincere smile, "Keep watching, little one. Your brother is going to surprise you even more. Just wait and see." Eri nodded excitedly, her eyes shining with hope and excitement. "Yes. I know it will. He's the coolest hero of them all," her voice filled with confidence as she imagined Izuku crossing the finish line with a big smile. Meanwhile, the stadium vibrated with the cheers of the crowd, and Eri felt the atmosphere permeate with energy. She wondered how far her brother would go, what feats he would do to inspire others, and most of all, how much it meant to her to see him fight for his dreams. In his mind, Izuku's image stood up, not only as his brother, but as a true hero who was ready to face any challenge. "Good luck, brother Izuku," Eri shouted, letting out her excitement, as her heart beat in unison with the crowd. The future was shining before them, full of possibilities. I kept running, his pulse racing and his adrenaline still flowing. As I went, I couldn't help but wonder how I got here. Everything that had happened in this race seemed to me a whirlwind of difficult moments and quick decisions. Each obstacle, each challenge, seemed more foolish than the last, and yet he kept moving forward, overcoming each one with a mixture of instinct, strategy, and sheer willpower. The first great challenge had been that damned labyrinth. As soon as I saw it, I knew I would lose time if I tried to go through it like everyone else. I remembered what I had learned from my training. When you can't find your way out of a tricky situation, sometimes the best solution is to change your perspective. So I decided to climb. I used my magnetic boots to climb, gain altitude, and the net launcher to propel myself up the walls. From above, the maze seemed much less intimidating, and I found my way without wasting any time. Then came the precipice, the most dangerous of all obstacles so far. An immense void opened up in front of us, with cables hanging over the abyss like a death trap. Some tried to get around it, even if it meant wasting a little more time, while others hesitated to cross through the cables. I knew I couldn't afford to hesitate. So I pulled the net shooters out of my wrists again, feeling the rope tighten as it adhered to the other side, and crossed the cliff after swinging a few times. They've definitely helped me a lot, I thought, referring to Melissa's artifacts. Without her ingenuity and without the tools she had provided me, this path would have been much more complicated, even for me. I must admit, but it wasn't over yet. I had learned not to trust myself. At any moment something even worse could appear. As I ran down the trail, my mind was focused on the next challenge. Suddenly, I came to the last hurdle, a minefield. It was a fearsome terrain that mainly slowed down the leaders of the race. He knew this because he could see some students receiving explosions that, while not lethal, created large clouds of smoke and disorientation. It was a chaotic scene, and he could hear the screams and murmurs of the crowd in the stands, adding pressure to the already intense competition. Looking around, I noticed how some of the competitors were trying to use their quirks to overcome this challenge. Some moved quickly, trying to dodge explosions, while others tried to spot the mines with a variety of skills, from the use of sound waves to extrasensory perception techniques. It was evident that strategy and agility were crucial in this part of the race. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline run through me. Analyzing my options, I noticed that there were no tall structures nearby to swing into, which meant I couldn't opt for an overpass. Although my speed was good, I knew that at some point I would reach the limit of my endurance. One misstep could make me fall into the trap. The minefield stretched out before me, and smoke explosions came out as warnings. He needed to be clever and find a strategy. I watched as some of the students tried to advance, using their quirks in ingenious ways, but I couldn't depend on something I didn't have. I had to rely on my own resources to win this. If I achieved first place, this would lead to the inventions that Melissa provided me capturing the attention of the viewers, and I would fulfill my part of the bargain. And maybe, with the money she earns, she could take Eri to eat at a fancy restaurant with food she'll like so much. I don't know, you have to see. The thought of seeing his face lit up when tasting a delicious dish filled me with energy and determination. Leading Bakugo and Todoroki, I shout present mic, but don't pay attention to any of that. I soon realized the number of mines that stretched out in front of me, each one posing a danger that could stop me in my tracks. But then, a spark of inspiration lit up my mind. I could use the pushing force of the explosions of various mines to propel me forward. It was a risky plan, but it was my only option to win this. Carefully, I began digging into the ground to dig up the mines. My breathing became slow and controlled. I knew that any mistake would mean the end of my career, and maybe worse. Touching them sideways was the key. I felt the structure under my fingers, anticipating the right moment to release its energy without suffering the consequences. I needed at least 10 explosions to achieve my plan, and every second counted. In the background, I could hear the murmurs of the crowd. Some were screaming that I was crazy, others were just watching in amazement, but their voices were a distant noise that I couldn't allow myself to hear completely. My focus was on the mines, on every precise move that would take me one step closer to the goal. When I finally realized that I already had what it takes, I decided to activate another of Melissa's inventions, the gauntlets. With a determined movement, I clenched my fists and instantly, medium energy shields emerged from my arms. Joining my two arms, I formed a larger shield, a glowing barrier that reflected the sunlight. Without wasting any time, I prepared myself and struck with the shield the mines I had gathered. The impact was much more explosive than I expected. The mines exploded in a series of flashes of the shock wave each mine, pushing me in the direction I needed. It was a good idea to find the right angle for that. As I made my way across the sky, the crowd erupted in cheers and shouts of surprise created a chaotic symphony, but in my mind everything was calm as I flew and propelled myself through the skies. I heard the occasional scream behind me, maybe from my fellow fighters, but I remained focused. Adrenaline kept flowing through my veins, keeping me alert as I descended, visualizing every detail of the terrain. As I got closer to the ground, I prepared my next move. With my eyes fixed on the ground, I activated a shield on my right arm, feeling the energy vibrate on my skin. With my right wrist, I aimed at the ground and activated the net launcher. The net shot accurately, making sure to catch on a solid surface. When the net tightened, I used it to propel myself to the ground. When I was close to the ground, I used the shield to mitigate the impact. Although the blow was a bit painful, I managed to pull myself together quickly, my body still moving. The excitement of being so close to the finish gave me a new impetus. As I saw the entrance that marked the finish line, a wave of determination went through me. It was time to give it my all. Once again, I aimed my net launcher at the nearby wall, feeling the mechanism respond to my commands. I pulled hard at the net, propelling myself forward, like a projectile fired from a cannon. My body darted toward the goal, the wind whistling around me. The adrenaline filled me, and the excitement was palpable. As I crossed the threshold of the door, a roar of cheers and applause erupted around me, as if the entire crowd had exhaled in unison, celebrating my arrival. It was a mixture of euphoria and disbelief. I couldn't believe I had made it. The giant screen of the stadium showed my figure, highlighting the intensity of the moment. The cameras focused on my face, and in that instant, I saw the expressions of surprise and admiration on the faces of the spectators. Midoriya Izuku is the first to arrive, President Mike shouted, his voice echoing through the stadium. I felt the momentum of victory fill me. I had overcome obstacles that seemed impossible, and all thanks to my wits and Melissa's tools. As I recovered from the effort, I turned to look at the crowd. The cheers and euphoria of the spectators surrounded me like a blanket, but, really, their ovations and joy did not matter to me at this moment. Instead, my eyes fell on the section where Eri was. Watching her, I realized that she was much happier than ever. Her illuminated face reflected pure happiness as she smiled and jumped at the sight of me. That simple image of her joy filled my heart with warmth and satisfaction. I didn't need more than that to understand that all the effort had been worth it. So, seeing her, I couldn't help but smile too. It was a small moment, but for me it meant the world. In an instant, all the sacrifices, sweat, and pressure of the challenge vanished, and only the happiness we shared remained. I had managed not only to cross the finish line, but also to make her proud, and that was the most important thing. "Good, they're coming one after another," shouted the radio hero, President Mike expectantly. "We'll make a list of the results then. For now, good job everyone." With those words ringing in my ears, I took a moment to catch my breath and enjoy the excitement of the moment. As the crowd continued to cheer, I looked down at the track, where the other competitors continued to cross the finish line, each with their own style and skills. Suddenly, I heard a voice calling me, excuse me." I turned, and saw a brown-haired girl, her cheeks flushed from the effort. It seemed like she'd been running around a lot, but he still walked over with a nervous smile. Midoriya, hello, he began, trying to catch his breath. "Hero Course Student, 1A, Uraraka Ochako," I replied without further ado to this Hero Course student. "Yes, I know who you are. What do you want?" She smiled, although she looked a little unsure. "I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for saving me." My mind went blank for a moment. I didn't remember doing anything like that. I don't even remember talking to this girl, so I replied with confusion, "Save you? You must have made the wrong person." Her expression lit up with the memory. "No, I remember you. During the entrance exam, I was trapped in the rubble. I was so scared, and I couldn't get out of there, and a giant robot was coming over. But you came, and thanks to you I was able to get out of there. Without you, I don't know what would have happened." "I think I remember what you're talking about. I had seen that girl trapped under the rubble and I couldn't bear to stand idly by while other competitors passed by, like idiots." Although I didn't understand why she thanked me, if I had only done what I thought was right, I replied, "Oh, I see. You don't have to thank me for that." She shook her head firmly. "No, I want to also thank you for your advice. I asked and they told me that you were the one who made them. Thanks to what you shared with me, I managed to improve." This girl's smile, her energy and appreciation, was not something I was really looking for. I was just doing my job. "Like I said, you don't have to thank me," I muttered, feeling a little uncomfortable with the attention. It wasn't anything special, I decided it was better to end the conversation here. Still, thank you, Midoriya, she answered, with a warmth that made me doubt. Her sincerity made me feel a little lighter. Confused, I didn't really know what to think now. Although I didn't have much time to do it either. The first game of the first year stage is over, Midnight exclaimed with her usual energy, capturing everyone's attention. Now, look at the results. My eyes quickly drifted to the large screen that lit up with the names of the competitors. As the names appeared, I noticed that I had won over most of the students in the hero course. Most of them had also advanced to the second stage, though I couldn't help but think that some had relied too much on their quirks without really considering more effective strategies. To me, that was inefficient. They had relied on their raw power, but on the road to being heroes, it wasn't just about strength, strategy and ingenuity were just as important. As I pondered this, the crowd was still excited, but I remained silent, watching the screen intently. Among the names that stood out, I noticed that my fellow support department, Hatsume Mei, had also made it into the 42 students advancing to the next stage. Her ingenuity and inventions had definitely helped her overcome many, but thinking about the rest of the support department, I felt a small twinge of grief. They hadn't been as lucky, and while they weren't expected to excel in combat trials like this, I couldn't help but feel that they deserved more recognition for all they brought to the table behind the scenes. Well, at least Mei and I made it, I thought with a slight sigh. However, I couldn't afford to relax too much. The next stage would be even more challenging, and I needed to be prepared. Everyone did an impressive job in this round, Midnight exclaimed, her smile shining as the crowd chanted excitedly, but unfortunately, not everyone will be able to advance to the next stage. Don't worry, there will be more opportunities to shine at future events. As she spoke, she turned to the large screen behind her and, with a dramatic gesture, pointed to the digital board. Now it's time to see what the next game will be, she announced excitedly. The lights on the screen flickered, showing a number of possible tests before stopping at one in particular. A brilliant title appeared in big, bold letters. Cavalry Battle. The crowd erupted in cheers as Midnight continued to explain the rules, which consisted of forming teams of 2 or more people, trusting others and defending your points while attacking, basically the rules of an ordinary game of chivalry. The only difference in this test was the distribution of points. Depending on the outcome of the last game, each student will be assigned a score, Midnight explained with a touch of drama. Points are assigned by finishing position, 5 points for the last, 10, 15, and so on. Until you reach the first, who has the amount of 10,000 points. The impact of those words resonated in my mind like a hammer blow. I immediately felt the stares of all the students riveting on me. It was not only the fact of having the most points to steal, but also the biggest problem. I had to team up with people I don't know. I'm screwed, I thought as I looked around, seeing how some were already starting to whisper and plan their moves. In the meantime, I knew I would have to do something quickly, or I would find myself alone in this battle, which would be a total disaster. As I began to analyze my options, a voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Midoriya. I turned to see who it was and, to my surprise, it was the girl from before, Uraraka Ochako. What was she doing here? She didn't understand why she was approaching, but before I could ask her, she smiled and said firmly, "Let's team up," Uraraka said firmly, her smile sincere and full of confidence. I was silent for a moment, processing her words. Why would anyone want to join me, knowing that I am the main target? The amount of points I had made me the biggest target of the competition. Are you sure? I asked, still incredulous. I trust you, Midoriya. Besides, we're friends, aren't we? She repeated with a determination that threw me off. Her smile was genuine, and somehow, I felt more confused. How long have we been friends? My mind tried to remember some key moment that I didn't remember, but perhaps, for her, the camaraderie we had shared in this moment was enough. Although I wasn't entirely convinced, my options were limited. I needed allies, and fast. Okay, let's team up, I said while nodding slightly. Just then, a familiar voice burst onto the scene. Green. It was Hatsume Mei, who jumped up and down with overflowing energy. Uraraka looked at her in surprise, saying that she was that strange girl she had met earlier during the tests. But, as was her custom, May completely ignored her and addressed me directly, as if no one else existed. "I knew you'd stand out because of those babies Shield lent you," she exclaimed excitedly, taking a series of artifacts from her backpack. "You caught everyone's attention. And if I team up with you, my babies will shine in the eye of all companies too," she added, showing a bunch of gadgets she had been preparing with a proud smile. I thought for a moment, while May was still excitedly talking about the functionality of her inventions. She was right about something. Her devices could give me a significant advantage in this competition, more so if I combined them with the ones I had. And while her enthusiasm was chaotic, her talent was undeniable. "Do you accept?" she asked with her eyes shining with excitement. I looked at myself, considering my options. With Uraraka by my side, her confidence in me was already amazing, and May, with her technology, could be the key to overcoming the disadvantages that points placed on me. "It's okay. I accept," I finally answered, with a slight smile. With May and Uraraka by my side, I was starting to feel more confident. However, we were still missing one last member to complete the team. I looked around, seeing how all the other students were already finishing forming their groups. The options were starting to run out quickly, and we needed someone else before it was too late. My mind raced as I searched for someone who could fit in. That's when I saw someone in the background, standing alone, watching the scene in silence. He didn't have a team yet, and he seemed to be the perfect fit for us. Without wasting any more time, I quickly approached him and touched his shoulder to get his attention. "I propose a deal. You agree to be part of my team, and I will do everything possible for you to win," I said in a direct tone, hoping that he would accept. "What do you say, student of the hero course, 1A, Tokiyami Fumikage?" Tokiyami slowly turned, his deep, dark eyes staring at me with a neutral expression. For a few seconds, he said nothing, but I could tell that something in my proposal piqued his interest. His eyes flashed slightly, perhaps out of curiosity or because he was considering the possibilities. "What's your plan?" Tokiyami asked. "First, we should talk to the rest of the group," I replied, pointing to Uraraka and Hatsume, who were waiting for us a little further away. "We need to be all together before the second game starts." Tokiyami nodded, meaning that he agreed to be part of the team, and we both headed towards the girls, the pressure starting to increase with each passing second. We only had 5 minutes before time ran out for the preparation of the next challenge. When we arrived, there wasn't much time to introduce ourselves together, so I started explaining the plan. "So, my quirk is..." I interrupted Uraraka. "You don't have to explain, I already know their quirks, as well as their weaknesses, so I'll start with the plan." Everyone nodded again, paying attention as I detailed the plan. I felt the pressure building up, but I couldn't let it get to me. The key was to stay clear and direct. As we are the team that will receive the most attacks from the other teams, we must be one step ahead. First, we need to establish roles. Tokiyami, your quirk, Dark Shadow, will be crucial to protect us from attacks in blind spots. It's our best defense against ganks, but there's a weak point. If you're facing opponents who use light or fire-based quirks, Dark Shadow will be weakened. Tokiyami nodded, understanding the risk. For that, we have one of May's support items, this netting gun. If you find yourself in a situation where Dark Shadow can't act, use the pistol to immobilize enemies. I handed him the net gun and saw Tokiyami's serious expression, aware of his role in the team. "Got it. I will be alert to these threats," he said firmly, making it clear that he did not underestimate the responsibility. "Perfect. Now, Uraraka, your quirk will be key for us to move quickly, without needing to worry about the weight of the support items. For example, May has this jet backpack, and these boots that can levitate for a period of time, preventing them from taking fall damage." Uraraka's eyes lit up as she heard how she could contribute. "That sounds amazing," she said enthusiastically. "I will be able to lighten things up and keep moving without being weighed down by the equipment." May chimed in excitedly, as if she were presenting her latest creations. "Exactly. These boots can levitate for a limited time, which will be perfect for preventing damage in the event of falls or sudden impacts. The jetpack will allow them to move quickly around the field, whether it's dodging attacks or escaping compromising situations in seconds. I could see how the team was starting to fit perfectly into their respective roles. Each understood their role and how to contribute to the team's success. Good, I continued, looking at everyone. I will use the rocket pack, and I will warn them so that they can hold on and not fall. Now, you follow. Hatsume. Hatsume, always proud of her creations, smiled broadly. My babies will not fail you, she exclaimed with contagious energy. I'm counting on that, I replied, keeping my focus, but we can't rely on gadgets alone. We also have to make use of your quirk, Zoom. You will be able to see the movements of enemy teams from afar and alert us to any changes in strategy or possible threats that are approaching. Hatsume's eyes lit up at the idea, showing her trademark excitement for every aspect that involved technology or analysis. Of course, with my quirk I will be able to make an accurate analysis of the terrain, detect faults in your equipment, and predict your movements. I'll have an eye on every corner. That's exactly what we need, I told her. If we combine your analytical skills with the agile movements provided by Uraraka and Tokiyami's defense, we will have a considerable tactical advantage. The entire team nodded without objection, accepting the strategy with confidence. Perfect, now, I'll be in charge of protecting the ribbon from the 10,000 stitches I'll be carrying on my head, I continued, raising my hand to point to the gauntlets on my arms. Thanks to the shields built into these gauntlets, I will be able to defend ourselves from direct attacks, and I will use the net launchers to try to steal the tapes from the other teams. Uraraka smiled determinedly. Then all we have to do is avoid getting hit while we move fast and steal tapes. Exactly, I replied, feeling the plan form completely in my head. The key will be to keep moving constantly. We cannot stay in one place. If we do, they will surround us and attack us from all angles. Tokiyami, with his usual calm demeanor, added, Dark Shadow will be our first shield against any surprise attacks. I will protect the rear, so don't worry about sneak attacks. Finally, Hatsume, still brimming with enthusiasm, intervened, and in the meantime, my babies and I will make sure that nothing and no one gets close without us seeing them. Exactly, I replied, satisfied with his disposition. Remember, everyone will go after us because of the large amount of points we have. But if we follow the plan and support each other, we will have the advantage. The team was ready, everything was in place. The second game was going to begin, and now it was up to us to carry out the strategy. With the plan completely outlined, only the execution remained. Everyone on the team seemed willing and focused, ready for the challenge that was about to begin. I was feeling the weight of expectations, but with the strategy we had put together, I knew we would have a good chance to excel, even with all the teams gunning for us. Time is up, students. Let the second game begin. Midnight exclaimed, her voice echoing throughout the stadium. As the tension in the air rose, I looked at my teammates one last time before the test began. Remember the plan, let's work together, and we can do it, I told them with determination. The second game had just begun, and we were more than ready. In the elegant room of the HPSC, the silence became oppressive as the high-ranking members continued to watch Midoriya and her team. The screens showed every detail of the UA Sports Festival, focusing on how Izuku, the boy many had underestimated, led his team with a precision and skill that seemed almost impossible for someone who, until recently, had been considered quirkless. The middle-aged man who had been watching with a frown gently tapped his fingers on the table, an unsettling gesture that denoted his growing frustration. It doesn't make sense. A simple brat without a quirk, even if he uses support items, should not be able to stand out so much in an event of this magnitude. What the hell is going on? The woman next to him, who had muttered earlier, nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off the screen. If this guy keeps it up, it could change the public perception of the quirkless and those who don't own a great quirks. And that's a problem. If those individuals begin to believe that they can compete with the most powerful quirk holders, our system could begin to undergo changes that do not suit us. The old officer, wearing glasses and an air of authority, let out a heavy sigh. It's more than just a matter of image. If someone without a quirk manages to excel in this way, with a combination of intelligence, dexterity, and supporting items, then what's the point of what our society means today? It's a threat to everything we've built. The tension grew even more when Izuku, on the screen, stole another tape with a well-executed maneuver with the help of his net launchers. The other teams seemed to be at a disadvantage in the face of Midoriya's calculated tactics and his team's efficient cooperation. Hatsume Mei, with his arsenal of tech, babies, Uraraka with his gravitational quirk, and Tokiyami with Dark Shadow, made a perfectly balanced team, but it was Izuku who had managed to put all those pieces together, and I made them stand out. Another officer, who had been silent up to that point, finally broke the silence with a raspy and somber voice. If this goes on like this, it will end in total disaster. Look at him, there's 5 minutes left in the game, and he's still got that 10-point tape. The middle-aged man nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen as Midoriya once again dodged an attack and continued with his strategy. Yes. This cannot continue. But don't worry, I've already made a call to the UA, let's see what this brat does against 4 of the best quirks of this generation. The atmosphere grew colder and more calculating, as the HPSC top brass laughed at what was to happen next, with this Quirkless, out of the dump, Midoriya Izuku. This really was the worst possible scenario, being surrounded by several teams, with each of them preparing an imminent attack. I could see their gazes shining with determination, and the sound of their footsteps echoed around us like an ominous omen. This is not good. They're all here to take the ribbons from us, Uraraka muttered, his expression worried as he surveyed the surroundings. Adrenaline was coursing through his veins, and the weight of the impending danger was almost overwhelming. Tokiyami stood his ground, his dark shadow spreading around him, a comforting presence in the midst of the chaos. We must remain calm. Dark shadow can help protect us if they try to attack. Hatsume, always full of energy, adjusted her boots excitedly. We will take advantage of each of my gadgets. My babies will keep us safe. Feeling the pressure build up, I took a deep breath and said, remember what we planned. We must work together and use our skills to the fullest. We can get out of this. Tension was palpable in the air, and just when it seemed that the situation was becoming critical, a resounding sound filled the space. Present Mike's voice cut through the bustle of the festival. Time is up. Immediate relief came over our team. The other groups stopped, some looking confused, others visibly frustrated. I think someone was screaming with their heads on the ground. The threat of an imminent attack vanished in an instant. We did it. We are safe, Uraraka exclaimed, letting out a smile of relief. Tokiyami, though relieved, kept his serious gaze, but this is only the beginning. We must prepare for whatever comes. It's true, still, thank you for cooperating, I added, feeling the weight of the challenge fade, even though I knew there was still a lot to do. Hatsume raised his hand excitedly. I want to show you some of my new inventions for the next round. They could be very useful. I was grateful to have such capable teammates by my side, and now, with the second game over, there was only the last challenge left. Adrenaline kept running through my veins as I watched the other teams, each showing off their own accomplishments and talents. Present Mike, with his usual energy, took the microphone and announced, now, let's look at the top 4 teams. The place was filled with murmurs of anticipation as teams were called in one by one. The atmosphere was charged with emotion and tension. The names of the advancing teams rang in my ears, and every time one was mentioned, I felt the pressure mount. First, Midoriya's team, Present Mike shouted, and a deafening cheer erupted from the audience. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at my classmates, all sharing the same mix of surprise and joy. Second, Todoroki's team. The crowd responded with applause and cheers, acknowledging the talented students. Third, Bakugo's team. The reactions intensified, and I couldn't help but notice the growing annoyance in me upon hearing that name. And, fourth, Shinso's team. Amazing. Present Mike continued, his voice echoing with excitement. The audience's gazes focused on us, the team that had managed to exceed expectations. However, as the celebration erupted around us, I couldn't help but feel a slight unease starting to settle in me, or so I think. These 4 teams will move on to the final round, Present Mike exclaimed. Now, before we begin, let's take an hour to rest, take advantage of it and go to lunch. The announcement was a relief to everyone. The team felt relaxed at receiving that hour of rest, a necessary respite before the final battle. Tokiyami and Uraraka excitedly looked at each other before turning to me. "Let's go have lunch, Midoriya," Uraraka said, smiling. "Would you like to come with us?" Tokiyami nodded, his voice deep and serene. "Yes, it would be nice to take a break and enjoy the food. Also, we should eat something before the final battle." Even though his invitation made me feel a little appreciated and taken into account, I shook my head with a kind smile. "Thanks, but I'd rather stay here, go over some strategies, and go see my little sister who's waiting for me upstairs, plus I already brought my lunch." "Okay, but don't push yourself too hard. Remember that you need to rest too," Uraraka insisted, worried. As they walked away, Hatsume stayed behind, completely focused on her damaged gadgets. Her face was scrunched up in a grimace of concentration as she worked on a contraption, attentive to every detail. "Hey, Hatsume, don't you think you should go get something to eat too?" I asked, approaching her. "No, my babies need to be in perfect condition for the last game. Just give me a moment," I replied, not taking my eyes off her tools. I opted to leave her alone, acknowledging that her passion for her inventions was unwavering. After all, her work could make the difference in the last game. So I made my way to the upstairs facility, where I knew Eri would be waiting for me. The thought of Eri waiting filled me with a warmth that prompted me to walk faster. I decided it was a good idea to pack both of our lunches into a special container I had prepared to keep it from getting cold. I didn't want to keep her waiting, after all. However, suddenly, someone stood in my way. It was the student admitted by recommendation, Hero Course 1A, Todoroki Shoto. With his cold and firm gaze, "Come with me, I want to talk to you," he said, his tone devoid of emotion, with an intensity in his voice, similar to anger. "No, it will be another time," I answered, trying to avoid a confrontation. I was in a hurry, and I was not in the mood for unnecessary chatter. However, instead of accepting my refusal, Todoroki used his ice half to create a small wall that hindered my path. Seeing the wall, I stopped, feeling the tension in the air. "I heard Uraraka say that you were responsible for those quirk analyses that came to our classroom. In other words, you were the cause of my defeat," he said, his gaze fixed on me, waiting for a reaction. I raised an eyebrow, feeling far from intimidated. Instead, I decided to make use of one of the attributes of my gloves. Not only were these support tools, but they could also channel the energy of the shields to increase my strength. With a swift movement, I struck the ice wall with all the power I could muster. The ice shattered with a crash, and splinters flew in all directions. I glared at Todoroki, making it clear that I was not willing to give in to his provocations. "I told you, another time," I replied firmly, feeling the adrenaline rushing through my veins. As I walked away, I noticed the surprise on his face, but I didn't stop to analyze it. I had to focus on what mattered, and that was getting to Eri. I continued on my way to the facility, feeling that brief confrontation had only intensified a part of my anger towards those abusive idiots who like to use their quirks to impose their will. However, I wasn't going to let anything or anyone distract me from what really mattered to me at that moment, having lunch with my sister. The facilities were in sight, and the thought of seeing Eri smiling drove me forward. Each step brought me closer to her contagious laugh, to her innocence that brightened up even the darkest of days. I imagined us sitting together, enjoying the food I had prepared with such care, talking and sharing a moment that we both needed. When I finally arrived, I saw Eri sitting at a table, her eyes shining at the sight of me, and her face lighting up with a smile. The world around me faded away for an instant. Everything that had happened before that moment seemed irrelevant. "Izuku," she shouted, standing up excitedly, "I was waiting for you." I took out the container with lunch, which I had brought first, and saw her approach with a look full of joy. "Look. I cooked your favorite dish," I said, as I offered her the food. Her eyes sparkled as she took the bowl with both hands. "It looks delicious." "Thank you, bro." "You're welcome," I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest at seeing her so happy. Here, with Eri, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. There was no room for worries or conflicts, there was only room for affection and mutual support. Before eating, I instructed Eri to wash her hands, and to my good fortune, there was a personal bathroom in this room. Once she came back and dried herself, we began to eat. The tension of the competition faded away, and I realized that no matter what happened in the final round, the time I spent with Eri was what really mattered. Eri looked at the bowl excitedly, then looked at me with shining eyes. I saw everything you did. You were amazing. You won so many ribbons. It was exciting. His joyful laughter filled the room. I couldn't help but smile at her excitement. Her happiness was contagious. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Eri. The team put in a great effort, and I'm so proud of everything we accomplished. You're the best, bro, she exclaimed, his eyes shining with admiration. I blushed a little at her praise. As we continued our meal, sharing stories and laughter, I knew that true success wasn't just measured in ribbons or positions, but in moments like this, when I could see Eri happy and feeling safe. Did you like being accompanied by various heroes? I asked, interested in knowing what her experience had been like. Eri nodded enthusiastically, her eyes shining. It was great. Everyone was so kind to me. Her face lit up as she recalled each moment. They made me feel special too. They made me laugh a lot and told me about their own adventures. I can't wait to tell my friends about them. I was overjoyed to hear how happy she was. I'm glad they treated you well, it's the least they could do. And you too, you're the best brother, Eri said, smiling widely. I feel lucky to have you. I feel lucky to have you too, I answered sincerely, feeling a warmth in my heart. In those moments, worries about the competition and the stress of the festival seemed to fade away, leaving only the happiness of being together. As we finished eating, I realized that there was nothing more precious than those simple moments, where all that mattered was Eri's well-being. Midnight's voice echoed throughout the venue, capturing everyone's attention, students and spectators. This is the matchmaking based on the results of the tournament. In these upcoming battles, it will be 1v1. The stadium was filled with murmurs and excitement as the giant screen projected the matchups of the first round of eliminations. The students watched intently, knowing that each of those bouts would be crucial, not only to advance, but to demonstrate what they had learned so far on their way to becoming professional heroes. The pairing was as follows. First elimination round. 1. Bakugo Katsuki vs. Kaminari Denki. An explosion of power and electricity. Everyone knew that Bakugo would not hold back and Kaminari would have to be very cunning if he wanted to stand a chance. 2. Hiroshima Eijiro vs. Tetsu. A duel of steel titans. Both with very similar skills, their clash of endurance and determination promised to be an unforgettable fight. 3. Aoyama Yuga vs. Ashido Mina. Aoyama with his bright laser would face Mina's agility and acid. A combat between grace and chaos. 4. Uraraka Ochako vs. Hatsume Mei. Uraraka, with its zero gravity, against Hatsume and his arsenal of gadgets. This combat would be as technical as it would be strategic. 5. Shinso Hitoshi vs. Shiozaki Ibara. Shinso, with his mind control quirk, against the nun Ibara and his power to manipulate vines. Here, the mind and faith would meet. 6. Todoroki Shoto vs. Shiro Honda. Todoroki, with his power of ice and fire, in front of Shiro and his adhesive tape. This confrontation promised to be fast and exciting. 7. Iida Tenya vs. Tokiyami Fumikage. Iida's speed against the darkness of Tokiyami's quirk, Dark Shadow. A battle that would be a test of speed and control. 8. Yaoyorozu Momo vs. Midoriya Izuku. Yaoyorozu's intellect and ability to create against Midoriya's strategy and prowess. A confrontation between two brilliant minds. The students exchanged tense and excited glances. They knew that these bouts would define their position in the competition, and each of them had something to prove. Yaoyorozu Momo. Izuku repeated in his mind, knowing that he was facing one of the smartest and most strategic students in that class of the hero course. He remembers reading her file. Momo was not only able to create any object she needed, but she always had a tactical solution for any situation. That meant he couldn't rely on a simple plan. He would have to be ingenious and anticipate their movements. Midoriya Izuku, for her part, Momo watched Midoriya with a mix of respect and concern. Although she didn't know him well, as he was part of the support department, and she had never seen the true extent of his quirk, not yet shown, which put her at a clear disadvantage. She knew he was a formidable strategist. After all, she remembered those quirk analyses he had distributed among his companions, revealing ways to make the most of their abilities. Some of those approaches would never have occurred to her. If anyone has a plan for any unforeseen event, it's him, she thought. They were both aware that this fight would not just be a test of power, but a battle of wits. Momo, determined not to underestimate her opponent, began to formulate a series of plans in her mind. She knew that she could not rely on her quirk alone, but would have to foresee every possible strategy of Midoriya. If I don't know what he'll do, then I must be prepared for everything, Yaoyorozu thought. Midoriya, for his part, was concentrating on how to use the skills from the training he was subjected to, his support items, before the key moment. Both were ready for the confrontation, each aware of the other's intelligence, and they knew that the first step in this battle would be crucial. Present Mike exclaimed through the microphone, "All right, let's start with the recreational activities that the sports festival offers first." The combat stage, an imposing design by the hero's Mentos, the arena floor was carefully prepared for battle. It was a battlefield completely designed for a confrontation between supposed future heroes. As I looked at the competition board, a series of thoughts began to flow into my mind, evaluating the fights that had already taken place. Each of them had been a test of skill and strategy, but, as always, there was more to it than meets the surface. I knew that, in this competition, the fights were not just a matter of strength or quirks, but of intelligence, preparation, and sometimes, luck. Although some were just trusting their quirks, without thinking, without preparation, sometimes with luck. I analyzed the matches already over, and began to write down everything I could in my notebook. 1. Bakugo Katsuki vs. Kaminari Denki. Bakugo's bout was predictable to some extent. He was the same beast as always. His aggressiveness and ability to exploit any weakness in the opponent made him quickly overpower Kaminari, who, with his electricity quirk, tried to be cunning, use the advice he received from me, and use his electricity, concentrating it from a point like the fingers of his hands, without having to release it all at once. But Bakugo gave him no room to breathe, and Kaminari ran out of options when his electricity was not enough to overcome Bakugo's continuous precise explosions. The result was obvious, but that didn't detract from Denki's credit for trying, as opposed to looking like an idiot. 2. Hiroshima Eijiro vs. Tetsu. A clash of pure endurance. Both, with similar quirks, had managed to almost tie in every aspect of the fight. I recommended in his report that he not focus on an endurance fight, as his body would become exhausted. However, his determination made him ignore the recommendations, and the fight ended when they both fell to the ground, exhausted, and Kirishima won by decision of the judges, but Kirishima's victory was more a matter of who managed to resist a little longer before reaching his limit. 3. Aoyama Yuga vs. Ashido Mina. Aoyama tried to keep his distance, using his laser quirk, which he determined in his report, that it is not adapted to his body, so he should avoid using it for long periods of time and rely more on other support items, but he did not pay attention and used his laser all the time. For her part, Ashido with her agility and her acid kept the pressure on. Her unpredictable and almost chaotic style made her unstoppable. I don't need to follow my recommendations to win, as Aoyama couldn't stay accurate enough, and Ashido took her chance to win. It was Ashido's control over her quirk and her mobility that led her to victory. 4. Uraraka Ochako vs. Hatsume Mei. This was a faster match than any of the others. Hatsume didn't want to fight, she just wanted to show off her inventions to others, so after showing them off, including their basic functions and advantages, she just gave up, and gave the victory to Uraraka. 5. Shinso Hitoshi vs. Shiozaki Ibara. Shinso, as always, used his quirk, mind control, in a precise way, wanting to provoke Shiozaki, who only responded by attacking with her vines, managing to trap Shinso. However, Shinso managed to deceive her at a crucial moment, by insulting the religion she was a part of, and responded furiously, which she gave him the control he needed. A more subtle combat than the others, but just as shocking, seeing how Shiozaki let go of Shinso, and walked to the limits, giving him the victory. 6. Todoroki Shoto vs. Shiro Honta. Todoroki was unstoppable. Shiro tried to use his tape to keep his distance, but Todoroki simply froze everything around him before Shiro could actually attack. Most impressive was how Todoroki controlled both the battlefield and his opponent, demonstrating absolute control of his ice. Shiro never had a real chance. 7. Iida Tenya vs. Tokiyami Fumikage. This match was a race of speed and control. Iida used her incredible speed to try to overtake Tokiyami, but Dark Shadow was a difficult obstacle to overcome. The power of Tokiyami's quirk was always present, but Iida showed near-perfect control over his movements, eventually overwhelming Tokiyami at a decisive moment. The victory was narrow, but well-deserved for Iida. 8. Yaoyorozu Momo vs. Midoriya Izuku. Now it was my turn. Yaoyorozu Momo, one of the smartest and most strategic students in our class. I knew I couldn't let my guard down at any point against her ability to create anything I needed a tactical advantage. But I knew there was a downside to her, which would be key in being unpredictable and forcing her to create under pressure. The only thing clear was that this fight would be for who could best use his intellect and resources. With the previous fights in mind and my strategy defined, I knew I had to be prepared for anything Momo could do. My approach was not just to defeat her, but to make sure that the plan I had formulated was flexible enough to adjust in the moment. He knew that this would be more than just combat, it would be a test of ingenuity and will. And with that determination, I headed for the battlefield. I just hope that Eri is paying attention to the fight, it's always good to see her happy. Present Mike, with his trademark energy, almost burst the speakers when he picked up the microphone. His voice echoed throughout the arena, filling it with anticipation. And now, we welcome our next participant. Roared enthusiastically, as the audience held their breath. A surprise student, the one whom no one expected to see in this arena, and I include myself. Straight from the support department, the amazing Midoriya Izuku. The stadium was filled with murmurs at the sound of Midoriya Izuku's name. No one expected him at that stage of the tournament, much less representing the support department, a category that rarely saw direct action in fights. Spectators, students and professional heroes alike, watched with a mixture of amazement and skepticism. In their minds, the image of a Midoriya who hadn't shown a real quirk led them to underestimate him. To many, the announcement sounded like a repeat of the time another student in the support department, Hatsume Mei, used the tournament as a platform to showcase his gadgets. The general expectation was that Midoriya would do something similar. The eyes of the audience oscillated between curiosity and anticipatory boredom, as if this fight was more of a distraction than a real confrontation. However, those who knew him personally knew that there was something more behind his presence there. Midoriya was not someone who would seek unnecessary attention. He had been methodical in his involvement, and although he hadn't shown off his quirk publicly, those around him knew that he shouldn't be underestimated. The entire stadium vibrated with the energy of expectation, as Midoriya walked to the center of the arena. This fight would not be what most expected, and both his teammates and the audience were about to witness something much bigger than a simple demonstration of inventions. The atmosphere in the arena was further electrified when Present Mike took the microphone with renewed enthusiasm. And now, let's talk about your opponent. His voice echoed in every corner of the stadium, and the audience paid attention with renewed interest. A young woman WHO has proven to be a force to be reckoned with. From Class 1A itself, an expert in creating objects, strategies, and using her skill to the fullest. The student by recommendation, Yaoyorozu Momo. Yaoyorozu's name was greeted with cheers and enthusiastic applause. Yaoyorozu Momo was a favorite, not only because of her outstanding intelligence and combat skills, but also because of the admiration she generated among her teammates and professional heroes. Her analytical skills and quirk creation allowed her to spawn virtually any item she needed, making her a formidable contender in any situation. The atmosphere changed. The skeptical gazes that were initially directed towards Midoriya were softened by the entrance of his opponent. Yaoyorozu was respected by all, and her presence guaranteed that combat would not be trivial. As Midoriya Izuku and Yaoyorozu Momo positioned themselves at their respective ends of the arena, the crowd murmured, trying to guess how the fight would unfold. All eyes were focused on the young man in the support department, a mystery to many. What can that boy do against one of the elites of the hero course? Asked several viewers. Yaoyorozu Momo was a contender known for her intelligence and her ability to create any object needed in combat with her quirk. Analysts and professional heroes held it in high esteem, considering it a natural tactic. Midoriya, on the other hand, was an enigma. No one knew exactly what his quirk was, or how he had gotten this far in the tournament without even wearing it. It was so strange. Midoriya, however, remained calm. With his mind focused on combat, he knew that Yaoyorozu would underestimate him at some point, thinking that he was a simple engineer and support analyst, but what they didn't know is that that same wow factor would be his biggest advantage. He had prepared several strategies, analyzing each of Yaoyorozu's possible moves in advance. He just had to see what she would do. Yaoyorozu, on the other hand, watched his opponent cautiously. Although he didn't know the Midoriya's quirk, she understood that he couldn't leave anything to chance. She knew that, like her, he was a strategist. His analytical skills had been evident in the reports and tactical analysis distributed among her teammates. I can't underestimate someone like that, she thought. Her mind quickly worked out possible scenarios, trying to anticipate his opponent's moves. The confrontation was full of tension, not only because of the duel of physical abilities, but also because of the mental battle that was developing between the two. While the public continued to place their bets and murmur speculations, the two opponents had already begun the real fight, one of strategies, ingenuity and surprise. This would not be a typical matchup. Present Mike's voice resonated with unstoppable energy, as he ensured that every word was heard and understood by the audience and participants. Attention, students and spectators. He repeated enthusiastically, with an air of expectation growing in the arena. I repeat the rules of this last match. The goal is simple, he continued. They must knock their opponent out of the combat arena, immobilize them, or make them say, I surrender. Any way to do this is valid, as long as they follow these basic rules. The audience fell silent as Present Mike paused briefly to make sure everyone processed the rules. Midoriya and Yaoyorozu maintained their focus, knowing that every word could set the course of the fight. Don't worry about injuries, Present Mike continued, with his characteristic vibrant tone. Recovery Girl is here to take care of you, and the Hero Cemento SS will step in if things get too dangerous. The gazes of the two competitors did not waver, although they knew that this last warning meant that the competition would be intense. Both were ready to give it their all, no matter what difficulties might arise. Safety comes first, but let's remember that this is serious competition. So give it your all, concluded Present Mike, as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Yaoyorozu and Midoriya took their respective spots in the arena, each ready to give their best in this crucial matchup. Midoriya, adjusting his gauntlets and checking his boots and net launchers, was deeply focused on his strategy. He knew that even though he was facing one of the most outstanding students in the hero class, his goal was more personal. I just have to win to better sponsor these inventions. Quote. He thought to himself, his eyes fixed on his opponent, but his mind focused on something much more important. He did everything for Eri, his younger sister. Winning meant getting the money needed to make sure she was safe and worry-free. And, in addition, she had the deal with her sponsor, Melissa Shield, who trusted Midoriya to stand out with the gadgets she had provided. Fulfilling that agreement meant ensuring a safer future for his sister. Yaoyorozu, for her part, watched Midoriya's every move. She knew that even though he belonged to the support department and hadn't shown his quirk yet, she shouldn't underestimate him. With the gadgets he carried, and his reputation for being extremely intelligent, every second in this battle would be decisive. I can't afford to hesitate, she thought as she prepared her own tactics. With the atmosphere charged with expectation, Midnight raised her hand with infectious enthusiasm. Her voice echoed through the venue, amplifying the excitement of the moment. You are ready, students. So, get started. Midnight's hand fell as her voice boomed through the stadium, marking the start of the matchup. Start. Midoriya took a step back, immediately activating her gauntlets and net launchers, her mind working at full speed. He knew that he had to play the surprise factor, take advantage of his gadgets and Yaoyorozu's lack of knowledge about his abilities to buy time and look for an opening. Instead of attacking immediately, he opted to move strategically across the arena, keeping his distance. For her part, Yaoyorozu vividly remembered the thorough analysis that Midoriya had shared with the class that day. Back then, she had considered it a curious and admirably detailed observation, something that reflected her partner's level of attention. But now, in the midst of a real fight against him, those tactics took on a new and urgent meaning. It was as if Midoriya had anticipated every one of her possible weaknesses. Midoriya, he understands others' quirks in a unique way, Momo thought, as her mind quickly went over what she had learned from him. It's like I've created strategies not only to counter me, but also to guide me. But today I'll have to use his own knowledge against him. Midoriya had been clear in his analysis. Yaoyorozu tends to create large and complex objects, which consumes more time and energy. If she could focus on crafting smaller, quicker to build items, she could maintain a steady, versatile offense. Momo, at the time, had been surprised at how well Midoriya had understood her quirk, and although she hadn't tried it too much so far, she knew that this match would be the perfect opportunity. He said he should create smaller, quicker to craft objects, like, she thought as her quirk began to activate, the familiar glow of creation appearing on her skin. Quickly, small smoke bombs began to materialize from her hands, small and quick to produce, but with great strategic potential. Midoriya probably already has a plan to counter my more complex creations. So I'll keep him in constant uncertainty. Yaoyorozu threw the smoke balls at different points in the arena, creating curtains of dense fog that would cover her as she moved and prepared her next move. For her part, Midoriya watched intently as smoke began to cover the sand. She's using my own suggestions. That means you're adapting to a more flexible strategy. I'll have to do the same, he reflected, sensing that the challenge was turning against him. From the stands of the stadium, several members of Class 1A exchanged looks of surprise and excitement. Did you see that? Ashido Mina exclaimed, excited. Yaoyorozu is making a smart move. This is going to be amazing. Kirishima, with his usual enthusiasm, added, that's it. The president really knows how to play to her strengths. It's great to see her in action. Wasting no time, Midoriya began to charge energy into his gauntlets. He was not looking to form shields this time, but to release all that accumulated energy in a powerful blow. If the smoke stays here, I'll be at a disadvantage, he thought, preparing to disperse it. With a quick decision, he raised his arm and slammed into the air with all his might. Instantly, a gust of explosive wind erupted from their attack, sweeping away the smoke that had covered the arena. The fog quickly dissipated, revealing Yaoyorozu's position, who could barely react to the force of the wind. Amazing. Did you see that? Kaminari said, excited. That Midoriya guy really knows how to use his quirk to adapt to the situation. Kaminari, replied Zero, adjusting himself in his seat. He's not using his quirk. What? Kaminari exclaimed, frowning as he looked at Zero in confusion. Now, Midoriya shouted internally, as he activated his net launchers, aiming at his opponent. With a swift motion, he fired at Yaoyorozu, attempting to trap her and limit her mobility. The nets flew at high speed, seeking to envelop her before she could react. You won't make it, Yaoyorozu replied, using her quirk instantly to create a series of panels that served as a barrier. The nets caught on them, but they failed to catch her. Almost and I get caught. I must be careful, she thought, feeling the adrenaline pumping inside her as she calculated her next move. Seizing the moment, Yaoyorozu decided to counterattack, generating a series of small light grenades, ready to be thrown. With a precise gesture, she threw them towards his opponent, hoping to dazzle him with the light's explosion. However, Midoriya, attentive to the threat, aimed his net launchers at the grenades. In one swift move, he fired the nets, and managed to deflect the grenades into the air. The explosions erupted at a distance, illuminating the arena with bright flashes, but not hurting him. Amazing reaction, Midoriya. That's what I call a real strategist. Present Mike exclaimed, his voice echoing energetically through the arena as he cheered on the students. "The guy is making the grade in this battle." However, Aizawa interjected, observing with a serious look, "He is not to be overconfident. Yaoyorozu is cunning and can change her strategy in the blink of an eye. Both have to maintain their focus." The exchange of explosions had caused the atmosphere to become electric, and the public was increasingly captivated by the skill and creativity of both combatants. The tension in the air was palpable, and every move counted in this decisive competition. Midoriya knew that she couldn't depend on the wear and tear on the number of calories Yaoyorozu's quirk needed to function. Aware that time was of the essence, he began to formulate a more efficient plan. "If I continue to dodge and attack unpredictably, I could create an opening," he thought, visualizing his next move. For his part, Yaoyorozu wasted no time. She began to create small traps and sticky bombs through her arms and hands, mobilizing herself with precision so that these were scattered around the combat scene. The strategy was clear: make it difficult for Midoriya to move and keep the pressure constant. Meanwhile, she formed a shield tied to her arm and an iron rod, preparing to close the distance and face her opponent directly. "I see, she wants me to move to dodge and fall into one of her traps," Midoriya thought, recognizing the imminent danger the situation posed. "If I stay static, I won't be at a disadvantage. But if I move, I could end up trapped if I'm not careful." Midoriya's mind worked quickly, looking for a creative outlet. "Let's do the opposite," Midoriya thought, determined to engage Yaoyorozu in hand-to-hand combat. With her getting closer, he didn't want to rely on the traps he'd scattered across the sand. Momo, seeing the determination in his gaze, launched a swift attack with her iron rod. Midoriya, prepared for impact, blocked the blow with his arm, relying on his stamina and abilities. The clash echoed through the air, but it didn't stop there. With a quick movement, he used the net shooter on his other arm to aim at his opponent, looking to catch her in his net and limit her movement. However, Yaoyorozu was ready. With a snappy turn, she raised her shield, blocking the net with surprising accuracy. Cracking a competitive smile as she prepared for his next move. The tension of the combat mounted, and the two faced each other, exchanging attacks and defenses in a frenzied dance of skills. Each tried to anticipate the other's movements. Sweat beaded their foreheads as the audience watched enraptured, aware that they were witnessing a clash of titans. From the stands, Class 1A watched with eyes like saucers. "This is amazing. I've never seen Momo fight like this," exclaimed Kirishima, impressed by Yaoyorozu's ability to adapt. "Yes, and Midoriya is also at her best. They are outdoing each other," Uraraka added, his voice full of admiration. Present Mike, in the center of the stage, couldn't contain his enthusiasm. "What an exciting fight. Not only are these two students brilliant in their skills, but they also display impressive strategy. This is what it means to be a true hero." A raised head, beside him, nodded, showing an expression of seriousness. "They're both pushing their limits. This is more than just a competition, they are learning and evolving in real time. It's impressive to see how they use both quirk as support material, in creative ways." Meanwhile, in the arena, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu continued their fight, each trying their best. Midoriya lunged forward, attempting to take advantage of a moment of distraction in his opponent, while Yaoyorozu responded quickly, creating new objects to counter each move. The exchange was constant, and while both fighters were strong, their true power lay in their ability to adapt and think strategically. Suddenly, Yaoyorozu stepped back, and Midoriya watched as a grenade of light came out of her hand, glowing brightly. Without wasting time, and in one swift motion, he lifted his foot and kicked the grenade upwards. The explosion lit up the sky, creating a glow that momentarily dazzled everyone present. Yaoyorozu was surprised by Midoriya's quick maneuver, an oversight that would prove costly. While her eyes were fixed on the show, Midoriya, taking advantage of those few moments of distraction, activated his net launchers. Precisely, he shot the nets at her and caught her, wrapping the sturdy thread around her torso. "Oh no!" Yaoyorozu exclaimed, barely realizing what was happening before Midoriya, using all his strength, began to deflect his opponent towards the edges of the arena. The move was quick and calculated, and Midoriya felt the adrenaline flowing as he neared victory. Finally, he decided to let go of the nets, letting Yaoyorozu fall to the ground with a slight blow. The entire stadium was silent for a few seconds, with the eyes of all the spectators fixed on the arena. The tension was palpable, and the excitement was in the air, like a spring about to burst. It was then that Midnight's cry broke the silence, her voice echoing throughout the venue. Yaoyorozu Momo has stepped out of bounds. The winner is Midoriya Izuku. The announcement was followed by a burst of cheers and applause. Midoriya, breathing heavily, felt the adrenaline begin to fade, reminding him that despite his endurance, it was not infinite. All around him, the students of Class 1A burst into screams of excitement, clapping and cheering for the young man from the support department who had challenged their classroom president. Unbelievable, Midoriya, Uraraka shouted from the stands, with a beaming smile. I can't believe what we just saw. That was epic, Kirishima added, jumping out of his seat. Who would think that a guy from the support department could fight like this? Absolutely, Shiro replied, applauding enthusiastically. His use of the net launchers was impressive. I never thought something like this could be done. Let us not forget Momo, Jiro said, smiling in respect. Her strategy and creativity in combat were incredible. She's one of the best at using her quirk. True, Uraraka nodded, with an admiring expression. She really adapted to the situation and didn't give up. He has a great future ahead of him. They both showed an impressive level of skill, Kirishima added, excited. It was a spectacular battle, and I'm sure they'll learn a lot from each other. Definitely, Iida said, adjusting her glasses. These types of competitions help us grow as heroes. Both Midoriya and Yaoyorozu have shown that they can face any challenge. Present Mike, completely dumbfounded at what he had just witnessed, shouted excitedly, amazing. Midoriya Izuku has secured a spectacular victory. What an amazing fight. Applause filled the stadium as Izuku, still breathing heavily, managed to observe Momo, who stood at the edge of the arena, visibly surprised but also proud. Despite the defeat, she didn't seem discouraged. Her expression was calm and collected, and instead of showing discouragement, her face reflected a smile of respect and admiration towards her opponent. She removed the net from his waist, stood up calmly, and looked at Izuku with an expression that conveyed pride in the confrontation they had had. Izuku, seeing Momo's positive attitude, smiled as well, feeling a deep respect for his opponent, although he didn't know exactly why. The tension and exertion of the battle seemed to fade as the two acknowledged each other's skill and valor in combat. Yaoyorozu Momo, from the Heroes Course, 1A, Izuku began, trying to hold his breath. When you're in the middle of a fight, never get distracted. Every second counts. His voice was firm but full of sincerity. Your quirk is awesome, and you just need to remember that focus is key. Momo nodded slowly, her smile remaining intact. Thanks for the advice, Midoriya. Oh, and also thank you for the analysis you gave my class. They helped me a lot to better understand my potential. It was nothing, it's my job. Izuku replied, modestly. With that said, Midoriya took a step back and walked away with a sense of satisfaction, glad that he had fulfilled one of his goals, to help Melissa and make Eri happy. The smile of his little sister lit up the stands, surrounded by several heroes, and that image filled her heart with joy. Knowing that she was enjoying the show, watching every moment, made it all worth it. As he walked towards where Eri was, the bustle of the stadium kept echoing around him, but everything faded away compared to the happiness he felt seeing her smile. It was a reminder of why he had chosen this path, to protect and make those he cared about smile. However, amid the cheers and congratulations of the entire audience, a piercing and furious gaze was fixed in his direction. Bakugo Katsuki, from a distance, watched with a mixture of anger and contained frustration. These extras celebrate such a boring match, Katsuki thought as he clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into the palm of his hand. Although a part of him knew that something had changed in Deku, since they entered the UA, his pride prevented him from accepting that this boy he had despised for years could become a real threat. I would have destroyed him like I did with that idiot face, he said to himself, knowing that he was the best and always will be. Anger bubbled up inside him, a mixture of jealousy and a desire to prove that he was still the best. Every applause that resounded in the stadium only fueled his frustration. Still remembering how that girl named Melissa shield-ratted him out to Principal Nezu, who warned him not to bother Deku, or shout that he was a Quirkless, or else there would be consequences. Consequences just for teaching a stupid Quirkless what his place really is. Idiots, Katsuki thought, feeling the rage transform into a blazing flame inside her. No, that useless one will always be that nerd who always crushed, he said to himself, clenching his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Although that wasn't the only thing that bothered him. Just at that moment, Present Mike's shrill voice echoed throughout the stadium, capturing the attention of spectators and students in Class 1A. And now, let's take a break to prepare for the second round. Here are what will be the next matches, he announced with his characteristic enthusiasm, as the stadium's giant screens began to show the names of the next pairings. The crowd stirred with expectation, as the students of Class 1A exchanged nervous, excited glances. The lights focused on the digital panel, which showed the names of the next contenders. 1. Bakugo Katsuki vs. Hiroshima Eijiro. 2. Ashido Mina vs. Uraraka Ochako. 3. Shinso Hitoshi vs. Todoroki Shoto. 4. Iida Tenya vs. Midoriya Izuku. The murmurs and exclamations did not take long to appear. Bakugo vs. Hiroshima, exclaimed Shiro, impressed by the first pairing. That's going to be intense. Hiroshima smiled determinedly. I'm ready, I'm going to give it my all, he said, although he knew that facing Bakugo would be a tremendous challenge. You'd better, Bakugo growled with a fierce look. 'Cause I'm going to destroy you, you piece of shit. Meanwhile, Ashido and Uraraka looked at each other with smiles, aware of the difficulty of their fight, but determined to do their best. Let's have fun, Ochako, Mina said, moving energetically. I say the same, Mina, Uraraka replied, mentally preparing. Shinso, meanwhile, folded his arms, analyzing Todoroki from a distance. This will be complicated, but not impossible, he muttered to himself. Todoroki remained serene, showing no emotion as he stared at the panel. Midoriya was silent for a moment, processing the challenge ahead. Iida Tenya, the younger brother of the hero Ingenium, possessed a speed and strength that were difficult to counter. This is not going to be easy, he thought as his mind began to develop a strategy. Iida's serious look from the stands confirmed her determination. Iida, always a man of principle, saw this fight as an opportunity to measure his skills, but also to show that he could live up to his brother's legacy. Iida Tenya is incredibly fast. His quirk, Reciprocoburst, allows him to accelerate in a straight line, but I also know that it consumes a lot of his energy. If I can manage his speed and find a way to counter his movements at the right time, maybe I can have a chance, Midoriya reasoned. Meanwhile, Iida adjusted her glasses with a serious expression, looking at the horizon. For him, the battle against Midoriya was not simply a competition, it was a test to demonstrate his growth as a hero. Although he respected him, he did not plan to hold back. Midoriya is very observant and a great strategist, I shouldn't underestimate him. My speed is my biggest advantage, and I plan to use it to the fullest. Both contenders knew that although there was mutual respect, the combat would be fierce. Midoriya had already begun to plan every possible move in his mind, and Iida was willing to give it his all to overcome his opponent. This fight will be one of strategy and speed, Midoriya thought, I have to make the most of every second. The second round promised to be even more exciting than the first. The crowd was excited, and the professional heroes watching from the stands knew they were about to witness memorable matches. The break would allow the contenders to prepare physically and mentally, but the tension was already in the air. In the elegant hall of the HPSC, silence turned oppressive as high-ranking members watched with growing concern Midoriya Izuku's performance at the UA Sports Festival. The screens showed every detail of the event, focusing on how Izuku, the boy many had underestimated, had not only defeated Yaoyorozu Momo, one of the elites of the hero course, in one of the confrontations they had rigged to get him out of the way quickly, but now he was fighting on equal terms with Iida Tenya, the younger brother of the renowned hero Ingenium. All this without having a quirk. The middle-aged man who had been frowning was clenching his fists on the table, a mixture of frustration and alarm painted on his face. This doesn't make sense. He can't, he shouldn't. What the hell is going on? His voice was barely a whisper, but the tension in the room was palpable. The old officer, wearing glasses and an expression of seriousness, let out a deep sigh, his voice laden with uneasiness. If it weren't for that support inventory, gauntlets with shields, net launchers, magnetic boots, a belt with smoke bombs. Where did he get those things? His gaze was fixed on the screen, as frustration mingled at seeing Midoriya's tactics across the big screen. The woman beside him, who had been watching with increasing uneasiness, nodded slowly, unable to take her eyes off the screen. As indicated, they were provided by Melissa Shield. The daughter of David Shield, she has a remarkable talent for creating assistive devices. Another officer, who had remained silent up to that point, finally broke the silence with a deep, somber voice. Shield. Those damn ones, always sticking their noses where they don't care. This is precisely what we should have avoided when the peace symbol, All Might, started using his support inventions. The room was filled with heavy silence as HPSC members exchanged tense glances. They knew that the influence of the Shield family, and especially their relationship with high-profile heroes like All Might, had allowed these quirkless and undesirables with failed quirks into their system. To them, the success of a quirkless like Midoriya Izuku was more than just an anomaly, it was a threat to the social structure of heroes in Japan. All Might is an exception, the middle-aged man replied, frowning. But this brat, Midoriya, is not a symbol of peace. It is a dangerous variable that defies everything we have established. We can't allow someone without a quirk to rise to the level of heroes, and even less with simple technological tools. At that moment, the HPSC room fell into a tense silence, abruptly interrupted by Present Mike's shrill voice, which echoed across the big screen, and the winner is Midoriya Izuku. The announcement cut short the conversation of the High Command, and the indignation was palpable in the room. Eyes turned furious and stunned, as the screen showed Midoriya, breathing heavily, having defeated Iida Tenya, who lay on the ground, out of bounds, his engines wrapped in nets, visibly tired. It can't be, one of the officers shouted, banging on the table in frustration. Is this why we manipulated the draw of the battles? To make it stand out even more. This is an insult to everything that our heroic society represents. A quirkless defeating two of our best students from the hero course. This wasn't supposed to happen. The woman next to him, with a pale face and an expression of disbelief, murmured, Sir, how do we stop it? The middle-aged man gritted his teeth, searching his mind for a solution, until he found it and told everyone present, don't panic. Although that brat defeated Yaoyorozu Momo and Iida Tenya, he will face Todoroki Shoto, the son of hero number 2. His quirk is much stronger and more versatile, that brat doesn't stand a chance. The High Command's gazes hardened, and an air of confidence began to fill the room. Todoroki Shoto has a combat ability that surpasses that of most students of his generation, the middle-aged man continued, his tone firmer. This is the perfect time for the hierarchy to be back in place. Midoriya has nothing to do against the ice and fire that Todoroki Shoto can generate. It should be a show that reaffirms what we've always believed, that quirks are the most important thing for the work of heroes. An officer nodded, relieved. If Todoroki Shoto manages to finish him off quickly, it will calm down and we will be able to avoid any unexpected support for Midoriya. Public perception needs to re-admire the quirks and not the absurd supporting material. Exactly, the middle-aged man replied with a calculating smile. If Todoroki Shoto proves that a powerful quirk can overcome any strategy or invention, the narrative will change. We need this to be presented as a lesson to those who think that the lack of a powerful quirk makes them just as capable. And in the meantime, let's enjoy the great humiliation that this brat without quirk will receive from the best generation of quirks. The atmosphere in the HPSC room changed. What had once been frustration now felt like expectant satisfaction, as if the higher-ups were already anticipating Midoriya's crushing defeat. Let everyone see the abysmal difference between someone like Todoroki Shoto and a boy without a quirk, he continued, slapping the table with his palm open. Society needs a reminder of why we have built this duns-based system, and why a mere brat like him will never be able to prove otherwise. The woman smiled for the first time since the meeting began, her eyes twinkling with malice. It will be a lesson that the public will not forget. The fall of Midoriya will reaffirm what we have always known. Without a powerful quirk, there is no place in the world of heroes. Exactly, another officer said, nodding. Let the next battle be the sentence for any aspirant who believes he can break the rules of the game. Todoroki Shoto will put him in his place. On the big screen, images from the festival continued to show Midoriya as she prepared for her next showdown. The HPSC members, now sure of their plan, waited with delight for the moment when the boy who challenged their system would finally face reality. I sat in silence, my breath still ragged after the intense combat against Iida Tenya. My body was exhausted, but my mind was still working at full speed. I took my notebook out of my backpack, my hands still shaking, and looked at the sand from the stands. He couldn't help but analyze every detail of the fighting that had already occurred. He had learned that every battle was a lesson, an opportunity to improve, and this sports festival was the perfect setting to study the strengths and weaknesses of others. I clenched my fists lightly as I reflected on the fights that had impacted me the most. My mind organized each piece of information, comparing it to everything I knew about quirks, strategies, and fighting styles. 1. Bakugo Katsuki vs. Kirishima Eijiro. The first confrontation was between Bakugo and Kirishima. I remembered how Bakugo, that arrogant idiot, tore Kirishima apart without a second of hesitation. He used his blasting quirk with the brutality that always characterized him. Kirishima, with his hardening quirk, withstood the blows as best he could, but Bakugo's unbridled fury was too much. Everything in him screamed aggression, as if there was no other way to win but to crush. The fight was short, but revealing. Kirishima's impenetrable defense didn't do much good against Bakugo's overwhelming offense. It was evident that Kirishima relied too much on his quirk, not anticipating that someone like Bakugo could overcome him with sheer brute force and speed. I wrote down some observations in my notebook. Defense is useless if there is no flexibility in strategy. It was a valuable lesson that he could apply in future battles. 2. Ashido Mina vs. Uraraka Ochako. The second fight I analyzed was Ashido's fight against Uraraka. At first, it seemed that Ashido had the clear advantage with her fast and versatile acid quirk, able to control the terrain around her with ease. Her agility allowed her to move and attack fluidly, leaving small areas of the field destroyed and slippery. Uraraka seemed to be in a tricky position, trying to dodge corrosive attacks while looking for an opportunity to counterattack. But then, something unexpected happened. Uraraka, following some of the advice I had given her earlier, managed to stay focused. She took advantage of the debris Ashido had left behind and floated it with her quirk. It wasn't a particularly flashy strategy, but it was effective. It created a small rain of debris that forced Ashido to retreat and try to dodge it, destabilizing her just enough. In that moment of confusion, Uraraka seized the opportunity. She rushed towards Ashido quickly, using all the strength she could muster, and pushed her out of the bounds of the field. The move was unexpected, and although Ashido tried to react, it was too late. It was a narrow victory, practically lucky, but a victory nonetheless. As I watched the result, I couldn't help but feel a slight satisfaction in seeing that Uraraka had used some of the tactics I had shared with him. Still, I noted in my notebook, luck is part of the battle, but preparation is what makes the difference. Uraraka had managed to keep going, though Ashido probably didn't expect to lose that way, despite also using my recommendations. I wondered if Uraraka would realize how far she could go if she managed to further refine her approach to combat. The fact that she had won showed me that, even in difficult situations, strategy could overcome brute force. 3. Shinso Hitoshi vs. Todoroki Shoto. The third match I reviewed was between Shinso Hitoshi and Todoroki Shoto. At first glance, it looked like a fight with a clear winner from the start. Todoroki, with his great power of ice, remained unperturbed. His cold and calculating attitude made it difficult to imagine a scenario in which someone like Shinso, whose quirk depended on making others respond to his verbal provocations, would stand a chance. From the beginning, Shinso tried to unleash his quirk. He would throw a series of taunts and questions, looking for any sign of frustration or distraction in Todoroki. However, Todoroki maintained his unrelenting silence. Not a word, not a gesture that indicated that he would fall into Shinso's trap. The combat was, in fact, a tense mental game. Shinso tried to destabilize Todoroki, but he simply did not respond. It was evident that Todoroki did not see Shinso as a real threat, and that further weakened Shinso's attempt to turn the confrontation in his favor. Finally, Shinso, realizing that he wasn't going to get his opponent to speak, raised his hands in surrender. "I've already gone too far," he said, his tone betraying a mixture of resignation and acceptance. He knew he had exceeded expectations simply by getting this far in the tournament, and even though he hadn't gotten the win, he had nothing to regret. As I reflected on the combat, I noted in my notebook, the limitations of Shinso's quirk are evident when facing someone who can keep his cool. His strength lies in tapping into the emotions of his opponents, but Todoroki is unwavering. Although Shinso had surrendered, he had shown admirable tenacity. He had gone further than many would have expected, and that was already a significant achievement. Todoroki, on the other hand, was moving into the final rounds, but not showing the true potential he knew he had. I watched closely, knowing that his ability to control both fire and ice made him one of the students, supposedly, with the most potential. Although in this battle he didn't even use his quirk, which left me with no data to analyze. 4. Iida Tenya vs. Midoriya Izuku. The fight against Iida Tenya was more than just a demonstration of speed and strength, it was a battle of ingenuity and strategy. I am not like the other students of the UA. I don't have a quirk, something that makes them special, unique. But that doesn't mean he's helpless. Everything I have I got through effort, ingenuity and help. My training is not only physical, but also mental. I have learned to plan every move, anticipate every attack. I clenched my fists as I remembered the feeling of facing Iida. His quirk engine gives him overwhelming speed, and his skill as a strategist on the field makes him a fearsome opponent. But I had something he didn't: the technological improvements Melissa Shield had provided me. From the start, Iida tried to use his speed to overwhelm me, but I was ready. I activated the magnetic boots Melissa designed for me, allowing me to stand firmly in the combat arena, anchored to the ground, no matter the strength of his attacks. Every time Iida charged at me, my boots would act up enough to render me unable to move, and still on the ground. But that only gave me a limited amount of time. Iida was persistent and fast. I used my net launchers, firing sticky lines to slow him down and control his movements. It wasn't easy, its speed made my shots difficult to hit. Still, I managed to catch it a couple of times, forcing it to change direction and force it to move the way I wanted. As he tried to break the nets, I activated the gauntlets. Not only did these generate energy shields to protect me, but they could also unleash powerful blows when enough energy was accumulated. I blocked one of his fastest attacks with an energy shield and, on the counterattack, I unleashed a concentrated blow that made him retreat several meters. Iida is a tenacious and respectable guy, but his greatest strength, his speed, was also his weakness. He was used to dominating combat with his speed, but my team allowed me to neutralize that strength. Every time I tried to close the distance, I would respond with another net launch or create a well-positioned shield to prevent him from getting close. I knew I couldn't match his speed in a direct confrontation, but I could wear him down and keep control of the fight. At some point he would tire. The turning point came when Iida, frustrated at not being able to get me out of the ring, decided to use his most powerful technique, the reciproc burst. The air tensed as I saw him preparing himself, and I knew this would be the key moment. I wasn't going to just wait. As he lunged at me at breakneck speed, I fired the net launchers toward the edge of the ring and propelled myself to the side, narrowly dodging his attack. With the movement I activated the magnetic boots to anchor myself to the ground again, and taking advantage of the fact that Iida was destabilized, I fired my net launchers at his engines, which caused them to fail. I took advantage of that moment and released the accumulated energy of the gauntlets in a blast of air that threw him out of bounds. Despite losing, Iida Tenya looked at me with respect, as did that girl, Momo Yaoyorozu, who had watched this match closely. My mind went back to the following confrontations. I knew that my next opponent would be someone who posed an even greater challenge. 1. Bakugo Katsuki vs. Uraraka Ochako. 2. Todoroki Shoto vs. Midoriya Izuku. My next match would be against Todoroki Shoto, someone with a powerful quirk. I took a deep breath and prepared myself mentally. My mind went over everything I had at my disposal, the net launchers, the magnetic boots, the gauntlets, the belt with some smoke bombs that, although useful, I preferred not to use on this occasion. Everything Melissa had provided me would be crucial in this battle. But beyond the tools, it would be my ability to analyze and adapt that would define the outcome. It will be better to prepare, to think of possible strategies. My mind began to wander, exploring different scenarios, until a sound took me out of my thoughts. Someone was calling me. I turned my head and, to my surprise, it was Todoroki Shoto. "Midoriya," he said, his voice calm, but with a touch of seriousness. "This time, let's talk." I looked at him, somewhat surprised by his initiative. I remember how Todoroki Shoto tried to get us to talk before, when I rejected him because I didn't have time. But now I had a little time before the first match of the semifinals began, and although I wanted to stay to analyze the fight that was about to start, I decided to accept his proposal. Maybe knowing a little more would give me an advantage in our next matchup. Before I left with him, my gaze drifted to the stands, where I saw Eri, sitting next to some of the heroes. She was smiling, her small figure looked calm and confident. Seeing her like this gave me a sense of peace. After everything I had been through, knowing that she was safe was a relief I needed before my next big challenge. Todoroki, noticing my pause, said to me in a firmer tone, "Don't be late." I nodded silently and followed him, wondering what he had to say. Bakugo Katsuki walked steadily towards the sand, his face reflecting the utter contempt he felt for everything around him. Round cheeks. I didn't even remember his name, because it wasn't worth it. To him, she was just another weak piece of trash, someone insignificant who didn't deserve his attention. Is this really the garbage I have to crush today? He thought, gritting his teeth. The real anger was not for her, but for someone else, someone who made him boil just by remembering it, Deku. Humiliation still burned in his chest. That damn blonde. Damn, how I hate her. Because of her, the teachers warned him, told him not to approach Deku, that he couldn't even mention the quirk to him. How the hell can I crush him if I can't even show him his place? That nerd without quirk, always acting like he was something special, when in reality he was just a loser. And worst of all, those stupid professors dared to stop me when I just wanted to make it clear that I had nothing to do here. Then he heard her speak. "Remember, Ochako, according to Midoriya's advice." What the did she just say? Suddenly, Bakugo felt his blood begin to boil, his fists clenched tightly. Is that fucking idiot also taking advice from that fucking nerd? Midoriya. Now Deku is the one who goes around lecturing these extras. First it was a silly face, then shitty hair, and now this girl. Deku. That useless one without quirk, acting like he knows something about battles, and these scums hear him. TCH. He growled as his eyes lit up with fury. Are there really idiots who believe that this loser has something to teach? Just at that moment, Present Mike's voice echoed through the stadium, filling the air with his trademark energy. And here we are, friends. It's time for the first semifinal. Get ready for a fight that promises to be explosive. The crowd erupted in cheers. In the left corner, with the fighting spirit and unwavering determination, it's the gravity-defying heroine, the bright and optimistic Uraraka Ochako. Present Mike's words seemed to float in Bakugo's mind. Bright, optimistic. Rather, it was a weakness that was about to be crushed. Bakugo couldn't help but have a sneer on his face as he watched Uraraka enter the arena, smiling and waving to the spectators, as if she had no idea what was coming. And in the right corner, the boy who always explodes in intensity, the true symbol of aggression and fire, the unbeatable Katsuki Bakugo. For Bakugo, this was no longer just another fight. It was personal. I'm going to tear this girl apart, and I'm going to enjoy it. I wanted everyone to understand what happens when you take advice from someone like Deku. She wasn't going to be the only one paying. This fight would be his chance to make it clear that following Deku only brought consequences. I'm not going to let this end quickly. Bakugo felt his anger growing by the second. I'm going to take long enough for this useless woman to understand that she should never have listened to Deku. Now, In this room away from the hustle and bustle of the stadium, I was in front of Todoroki Shoto. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with an almost suffocating silence. There were no words between us, just that palpable discomfort hanging in the air. I had come here with a clear purpose: to study Todoroki, to understand him, to break down every detail of his combat style, to know how to face him. But instead of getting answers, I found myself trapped in this tense void. Finally, I decided to break that absurd silence. "What did you want to talk about, Todoroki Shoto?" I asked. My tone was cold, but neutral. His gaze drifted for a second, as if he was evaluating whether he should answer me or not. I could feel the rancor swirling around him like an icy gale. Finally, he spoke, his voice as icy as his quirk. "I don't intend to lose to you," he declared, his words curt, but lacking any real impact. It was an empty statement, a no-brainer. I felt the weight of his pride more than the meaning of his words. "Did you call me just for that?" I said, without hiding my disinterest. If his intention was to intimidate me, he was wasting his time. "I underestimated you before," he continued, his brow furrowed as if he was gathering more anger with every word he said, "in the race, in the cavalry battle. But no more. This time I'm going to crush you, using only my ice." His determination was clear, but his logic was pathetic. Use only your ice. That was the greatest indication of his weakness, of his internal conflict. He was determined to limit himself, out of spite, out of hatred. It was not a real desire for victory, but a personal war that he himself did not know how to win. I looked at him without emotion, looking through his facade. "So that's it," I replied, staying calm, knowing that my words were going to irritate him. "You just want to prove that you're stronger than me, using only half of your power." His brow furrowed even more, his disgust was evident. It was clear that I had touched it where it hurt the most. But that didn't matter to me. If I had learned anything from watching him, it was that his real battle was not against me, but against himself. And right now, he was his worst enemy. "I remember that analysis you made about me, where you mentioned that I should use that fire to avoid severe damage," he said in a more aggressive tone, as if every word was poisoned by spite. "I don't need you to tell me what to do." I watched him closely, measuring his words, noticing how every mention of fire destabilized him. Clearly, he wasn't talking to me, he was just venting his frustration. But I wasn't his therapist, nor did I care to be. "Then you're a complete fool," I blurted out coldly, without any concern for how I'd take it. "What did you say?" His voice rose, anger peeking into his expression. I knew I was pushing him to the limit, but I needed him to see the truth, even if it was by force, and even if he was about to hit me. "What I said," I repeated, unperturbed, "all you are doing is harming yourself, without thinking of the consequences. What do you know about me? You don't know anything." His voice cracked slightly as he said that, as if there was a mixture of fury and despair hidden behind his words. "Todoroki Shoto," I began, in a calm and calculating tone, "son of Todoroki Enji, also known as Endeavor, and Himura Ray. Student accepted by recommendation into the UA Heroes course, forced to be the heir to a legacy of a man you clearly despise. Called by Endeavor himself his perfect creation, to surpass the symbol of peace, All Might." The silence that followed was tense, almost palpable. He knew he had struck a chord, and Todoroki's hardened expression confirmed it. "And I didn't do that analysis because I really cared about you or because I wanted you to improve," I continued, my tone cold and calculating. "I was just doing my job I was asked to do. Give you a detailed analysis of the quirks of the students in the hero course, so they can improve." Todoroki stared at me, his brow furrowed even more, and the internal conflict he carried with him was evident in the way his shoulders tightened. His hands clenched at his sides, his eyes full of resentment and frustration. It was obvious that all this was devouring him inside, but that was not my problem. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have really helped them, any of them. I feel no obligation to do so, neither for him nor for others. It was just my job. A job that gave me what I needed to take care of my younger sister. That was the only thing that really mattered to me. I didn't understand why, but in my previous confrontations I had felt something I shouldn't have felt. Joy. Satisfaction. Or maybe a weird mix of both. My opponents respected me. They said I was good hero, although I knew perfectly well that those comments meant nothing. Once they discovered the truth, that he didn't have a quirk, those praises would disappear in an instant, turning into contempt. Of course he knew. If you just meant all that, Todoroki Shoto, I blurted out indifferently, beginning to turn towards the exit, then there's nothing more to talk about. Keep self-destructing on your own, don't say later that you weren't warned. I opened the door without further ado, leaving the tension of the room behind me, and began to walk down the hallway. My footsteps echoed loudly in the silence. I thought that was over, that I didn't have to look back. But I was wrong. Suddenly, I felt a firm hand clinging tightly to my arm, stopping me in my tracks. I turned my head slightly and there was Todoroki, his face contorted with contained fury. His fingers trembled as he held me, as if the simple act of stopping me was the only thing keeping me from exploding. His gaze, full of anger and frustration, drilled into me, but at the same time I noticed a vulnerability that he was trying to hide. "Don't you dare talk to me like you know what it's like to carry this," he muttered under his breath, his voice almost cracking under the pressure of his emotions. I felt the heat radiating from his hand, contrasting with the ice he usually used in combat. Something inside him was about to break, and I was the catalyst for that crumbling. I stood motionless, staring at him emotionlessly. "Let me go, now," was all I said, with a coldness that echoed through the silent hallway. Although, in reality, it wasn't as quiet as I thought. A sound echoed behind us, and a low, recognizable voice filled the space. It was All Might himself. Beside him, walked a small figure, with large and curious eyes, Eri. "Young Midoriya, young Todoroki," said All Might, in his usual energetic tone, though a little more serious than usual as he felt the tension in the air, all right before their confrontation. "Excuse me, sir," Todoroki said, his tone somewhat more controlled but fraught with tension. "I was just talking to my next opponent. I'm retiring." With a slight nod, Todoroki turned and began to walk down the hall. I could still feel the trace of his fury in the air, but I didn't care. He had said what he needed to say. All Might watched Todoroki walk away before turning his attention to me, his usual smile on his face, the same one that tried to convey tranquility, as if everything was under control. "Young Midoriya, we finally meet." His voice was warm, almost comforting, but it didn't affect me. He knew that this was his way of approaching others, of maintaining an unbreakable image. I looked at him for a moment, showing no emotion. I had expected this meeting at some point, but it did not generate the same emotion as most. "Yes, finally," I replied with an almost mechanical calmness, looking away from Eri. His small hand was still clinging to All Might's, his face reflecting a mixture of curiosity and adoration. I leaned slightly to speak to him. "How has my sister behaved towards you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, even though I knew well how she used to be. Eri looked at me with a small pout on her face, her eyes shining with the innocence she always showed. "Oh, this little girl was well behaved," All Might said with his trademark smile and exaggerated laugh, always jumping and laughing as he watched his big brother stand out from the crowd. "Ha ha ha." Eri, still with the pout on her face, finally spoke, with that soft voice that always managed to disarm any seriousness. "Brother Izuku," said Eri as she stretched out her free hand towards me, and without hesitation, I took her small hand. As soon as I did, she threw herself at me, hugging me tightly, as if she didn't want to be separated. I felt the warmth of his embrace and how his body trembled slightly. I looked at her, a little surprised by the intensity of her gesture. "Don't worry," I said, trying to calm her down, "we were recently together having lunch. Everything is fine." But Eri didn't let go of the hug, and instead of answering, she leaned into my ear, whispering something that left me cold. Her words, so soft and shy, resonated in my mind. I didn't expect to hear that, and for a brief moment, my eyes widened with surprise. Without saying more, I simply pushed her aside a little to look into her eyes and nodded calmly. "I get it," it was the only thing I answered, trying to keep my composure, although her words kept bouncing around in my mind like an echo impossible to ignore. I wondered what was behind that whisper, but now was not the time to distract myself. Before I could say anything else or reassure Eri, the announcer's thunderous voice broke the silence. "All right, everyone ready for the upcoming semifinal match?" "Because I am." The sound echoed through the hallways, bringing me back to reality. My match was about to start, and it wasn't against just any opponent. I had to focus. Eri, with a tender smile, looked at me and said softly, "Good luck, brother." Her support gave me an unexpected calm, as if her simple gesture was enough to keep me focused. Next to her, All Might, with his characteristic smile, gave a thumbs up in encouragement. "Good luck in your battle, young Midoriya," he said to me with the same energy he always radiated, as if he fully believed in my abilities. I looked back at them, nodding slightly, before starting to walk towards the battlefield. At the stadium, Present Mike was at his best, his electrifying voice echoing throughout the venue as he captivated the audience with his endless energy. And now, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for one of the most anticipated semifinals. Two of UA's most promising young heroes will face off today in a battle that promises to make this stadium shake, he shouted with all his enthusiasm, the audience roaring around him in response. His charisma and passion were contagious, filling every corner of the stadium with excitement, while the cameras focused on every detail, making sure that no one missed a second of what was to come. Present Mike's voice boomed like thunder as the crowd erupted in jubilation. Despite the general excitement, some spectators still seemed shaken by the previous fight, trying to distract themselves with the vibrant atmosphere of the stadium. But the anticipation of this match eclipsed everything else. Deafening noise filled the air as the cameras focused on both contenders as they made their entrances. The eager faces of the spectators reflected the intensity that this fight promised. They knew that it was not just a clash of skills, but a battle of wills and emotions. The atmosphere in the stadium was charged with energy, a mix of nervousness and excitement palpable amongst the crowd. Lights flickered as fans held up banners and chanted the names of their favorite heroes. The roar of the crowd was deafening, echoing from every corner of the venue as spectators exchanged murmurs about what they were about to witness. The cameras focused on Midoriya and Todoroki's faces, each with a serious expression, ready for what was coming. The tension was palpable as both fighters remained motionless, focused on their thoughts and strategies. Present Mike, with his usual energy, raised the microphone once again, his voice echoing throughout the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Two of the best hero contenders will clash today in a legendary battle." The crowd erupted in cheers and screams as cameras focused on both contenders, their names echoing across the stadium's giant screens. Present Mike, with his characteristic energy, continued as the roar of the crowd filled every corner of the stadium. "On one side, we have the son of the number 2 hero, a young man whose control over fire and ice has taken him to the highest heights in the world of expected heroes. The one and only, Todoroki Shoto." The cameras focused on Todoroki, who remained serious, his gaze fixed on Midoriya, ignoring the roar of cheers. Applause filled the air as his name echoed throughout the stadium. And on the other side, a young man with unbreakable determination, WHO has surprised everyone with his courage and skills that defy expectations. The amazing Midoriya Izuku. The cheers grew even louder as the cameras caught Midoriya taking deep breaths, mentally preparing himself for battle. The intensity in his eyes showed that he was ready for the challenge ahead. "This is the fight we've all been waiting for, so buckle up, because this is about to explode," Present Mike shouted, raising the anticipation to frenzied levels. The atmosphere in the stadium was charged with tension and excitement. Every spectator, from the most enthusiastic to the most skeptical, felt totally immersed in this confrontation. Bright lights illuminated the arena, as murmurs faded into an expectant silence. Fans edged to the edges of their seats, eager to see how this highly anticipated battle would play out. Todoroki and Midoriya stared at each other, the intensity between them palpable, as if the air had grown thick. As the announcer counted down to the start of the match, time seemed to slow down. 3, 2, 1. The countdown echoed, and at that moment, everyone present held their breath, ready to witness a battle that would define the future of both aspiring heroes. The moment had come. With a resounding shout, Todoroki launched his attack. Now, in an instant, The air was filled with an icy mist as large blocks of ice emerged from the ground, sliding towards Midoriya with speed. The spectators peered up from their seats in disbelief, their eyes fixed on the action. Midoriya, realizing the impending threat, reacted instantly, channeling the energy of his gauntlets, clenching his fist and punching the air with force. A powerful gust of wind erupted from his hands, colliding with the ice blocks and shattering them in a burst of crystalline shards. The sound echoed like thunder in the stadium, as the ice pieces flew in multiple directions, leaving a trail of icy wind. The crowd erupted in cheers, excited by Midoriya's impressive response. Todoroki, surprised by the attack, quickly created a wall of ice behind him, preparing himself not to be blown away by the force of the wind. This wasn't going to defeat him. He had trained too much to let a single attack discourage him. "I'm not going to lose," he muttered determinedly as his mind focused on his next attack, launching a second ice attack and creating even more icy blocks than before. Midoriya, feeling the pressure of combat, he once again channeled the energy of his gauntlets, preparing a devastating blow. Concentration intensified in his mind as his body moved with precision. "I have to act fast," he thought, knowing that speed and strength were essential to counter the oncoming ice. With a silent cry of determination, he launched his blow towards where the ice was coming from, generating a powerful gust of wind. The force of the air expanded like a hurricane, crashing into the ice and disintegrating the blocks in a spectacle of flying crystals. The crowd erupted in cheers, amazed by the prowess of both combatants. Todoroki, watching his attack being thwarted, he felt a mix of frustration and defiance. However, he noticed something about those gauntlets that caught his attention. "I see," he thought as he stood up and looked at his opponent. "As excellent as this technology is, it also has a limit." Just like him, he watched Midoriya's arm tremble due to the recoil, as well as his legs. "Now I understand why he uses those magnetic boots. They serve to keep him from being blown away by his own attack," he mused. With a new determination, Todoroki focused his energy. Instead of just throwing ice, he decided to change his approach. "He's hurting himself, maybe I can take advantage of that weakness," he thought, watching his opponent carefully. With a quick movement, he began to accumulate ice around him, forming a sort of path that extended towards Midoriya. "If I manage to touch those gauntlets, I'll freeze them, and they won't work anymore," he mused as the ice rose around him, becoming a trap. Midoriya, for his part, felt the pressure of the environment changing when he noticed that they were approaching him, but he just waited for it to arrive. "I got you," Todoroki exclaimed as he leapt up to attempt to strike, his intent clear and calculated. But Midoriya was ready. With a quick maneuver, he dodged out of the way just in time, letting the force of Todoroki's attack become a mere flash of ice that formed on the ground, freezing the earth in its path. Taking advantage of his position in the air, Todoroki prepared to throw more ice, seeking to finally catch his opponent. However, he didn't expect Midoriya to do something unexpected. Midoriya, he was not intimidated. At the right moment, he channeled his energy and performed an acrobatic jump, spinning on his own axis. With a precise movement, he launched a blast of concentrated air towards Todoroki, hoping to destabilize him in the middle of his attack. The wind hit Todoroki, knocking him off balance just as he was about to create his ice trap. "This is what I was supposed to avoid, damn it," Todoroki thought, trying to compose himself in the air, but it was too late. The impact of the air made him lose his direction, and he was thrown to the limits. "No!" Todoroki screamed in frustration as he struggled to regain control. In a moment of pure concentration, he raised his hand and created a solid wall of ice behind him, stopping his slide and preventing him from being launched out of bounds. Feeling the coldness emanating from his own attack, Todoroki took a moment to steady his breathing and plan his next move. He knew he couldn't give up. Every second counted. "I can't let him get out of control like this," he thought, focusing on Midoriya and searching for any weakness. The stadium vibrated with the tension between the two heroes in training, both exhausted, but still full of determination. Midoriya remained standing, his muscles at their limit, but his eyes radiated an intensity that was unaffected by pain. For him, injuries were part of the path. There was no physical obstacle that could stop his will. On the other hand, Todoroki was panting slightly, feeling the weight of the battle in every movement. He knew he was using his power recklessly, wearing down his body, but he couldn't let that stop him. Not in front of Midoriya, who never backed down. "You are a fool," Midoriya blurted out, anger mixed with concern in his voice. Todoroki raised an eyebrow, surprised by his opponent's direct tone. "What?" he asked in bewilderment, frowning, trying to read between the lines of the comment. "Look at your right side," Midoriya continued, now pointing with his chin towards the middle of Todoroki's body, using it constantly as taking its toll on you, and you remain stubborn in continuing to self-harm, idiot. Todoroki gritted his teeth, knowing that Midoriya was partly right. The cold that had built up in his body was weakening him. His breathing was getting heavier, and though he tried hard to maintain his composure, his right arm was starting to go numb from the constant use of his ice. However, pride and rage were blinding him. He couldn't let Midoriya see him as weak. "Are you still doing the same thing?" he replied in exasperation, his eyes shining with a mix of fury and exhaustion. Midoriya always brought out that side of him that he tried to hide. "Did that old man buy you?" His voice had an ironic tone, although deep down, he felt vulnerable to his opponent's words. But Midoriya didn't answer right away. Instead, a small smile crept across his face, laden with a mix of understanding and defiance. Even in the midst of that fierce battle, there was something Midoriya understood that Todoroki hadn't yet. It wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about who you were, what you stood for, about fighting with your entire being, not in spite of your weaknesses, but embracing them. "Stop playing with your life, mediocre hero," Midoriya finally said, his voice now calmer, but with a harshness that he had shown before. "If you're going to act like that, then you'll fail, and you'll show everyone that you're nothing more than that. Aren't you happy?" The words hit Todoroki harder than any physical attack could. For a moment, his eyes met Midoriya's, and something shifted in the air between them. Todoroki felt a mix of rage and sadness begin to bubble up inside him, the echo of his opponent's words ringing in his mind. Suddenly, a memory rose to the surface, one he had treasured, he and his mother, playing heroes in his childhood kindergarten. The laughter and joy they shared was so vivid that he could almost hear the sound of their laughter. His mother always told him, "When you are a hero, you will be the best of all, I know it." Those words had been his guide, his beacon in dark times, but since the accident, since the pain he had carried with him, he felt further and further away from that ideal image. "Shut up, shut up, shut up." It was all Todoroki managed to say before he launched an iceberg. It wasn't as big as the one he had created earlier, but it was imposing enough to catch an unprepared Midoriya. The mass of ice slid forward with surprising speed, its sharp edges glistening under the stadium lights. Midoriya was finally trapped within the ice, his limbs frozen and his body immobilized. The sensation of the cold seeped into his bones, making him feel the weight of the ice surrounding him. However, despite his desperate situation, the spark of determination in his eyes still shone brightly, refusing to give up in the face of adversity. Todoroki, though visibly affected by the pain of the frostbite on his right half, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "I did it," he thought, feeling the adrenaline begin to flow through his veins again. He had proven to everyone that he could succeed without relying on his father, Enji Todoroki's quirk. "I can be a hero on my own," he repeated in his mind, feeling the pressure he had carried for so long begin to fade away. The stadium erupted in cheers and applause, the excitement of the crowd vibrating in the air, as the spectators cheered at the display of skills from both fighters. But no one expected that small iceberg to begin to break. From within it, a large gust of air emerged with force, breaking the ice into pieces and launching Todoroki backwards. That was it. He was about to lose, he was going to fall far from the boundaries of the arena. "No, it can't be like that," he thought, feeling defeat looming over him. Anguish filled him for a moment, but just when he thought his fate was sealed, a sticky thread caught him by the torso and returned him to the sand. Todoroki landed back on the battlefield, though the fall hurt and he felt disoriented. What just happened? He asked himself, looking around in confusion. The crowd roared, but he couldn't understand how he had returned to the fight so quickly. Meanwhile, Midoriya stepped out of the ice, sweat dripping down his forehead as he recovered from the exertion. One of his gauntlets was broken, damaged, and the arm that used it seemed to be in bad condition as well. Todoroki noticed that on Midoriya's other arm was that net that had brought him back to the arena. "Why did you do that?" Todoroki asked, his voice cracking from a mix of exhaustion and confusion, as he removed the net that was still trapped around his torso. He was totally tired, suffering from the frostbite on his right half, and the adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving behind a deep tiredness. However, Midoriya didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly walked forward, holding his injured arm. Every step was a struggle, but he was determined not to show weakness. He walked towards Todoroki, who was watching him with a mix of bewilderment and determination. "What are you waiting for?" he asked again, frustration creeping into his tone. Finally, when Midoriya was close enough to the exhausted Todoroki sitting on the ground, he looked him in the eyes and, in a voice that was barely a whisper, said, "My sister, the little girl who was with All Might, she hates her quirk too." The words fell heavily on him, like a blanket of understanding illuminating the situation. Todoroki frowned, confused by the sudden revelation that a little girl understood what he was going through, that a little girl knew what it felt like to hate a part of you. He didn't want to understand though, he didn't want anyone's pity. "You don't know what it means to carry this around?" he inquired, though deep down he felt there was something deeper behind his opponent's confession. "True, I don't know. I don't have a quirk to understand you," Midoriya finally confessed, his voice shaking with the intensity of his emotions. An awkward silence fell over the room, and the stadium, which had previously been filled with cheers and murmurs, fell into an astonishing stillness. Some began to murmur amongst themselves in disbelief. "He said he doesn't have a quirk," was heard throughout, as if Midoriya's words were heresy in this world of heroes and powers. Todoroki stared at him, stunned. The confusion on his face gradually turned into a mix of disbelief. A Quirkless, a loser from birth, was telling him something like that. As anger and resentment bubbled up inside him, he refused to accept what Midoriya was offering him. "I will never use that fire. I hate that fire. I hate it. No more," Midoriya interrupted sharply, taking a step forward, his voice filled with determination. "No more." Shoto paused for a second, surprised by the firmness in Midoriya's words. Despite all the resentment and pent-up anger, there was something in Izuku's tone that made him hesitate, even if he didn't want to admit it. "For the sake of your loved ones, be better," Midoriya continued, his gaze fixed on Todoroki as if he could see past his facade. "Prove that you are better than that hypocritical trash who calls himself a hero." He pointed at Endeavor, who was watching them with a mix of surprise and disdain, visibly offended by his words, "or you can continue to stagnate and fail." Midoriya's words echoed through the air, challenging Todoroki to confront his own sense of worth and identity. The mention of Endeavor caused a spark of fury to ignite within him, but also a drop of doubt. Was that what Shoto wanted to prove? "What do you decide?" That question pierced Todoroki's emotional shell. The hatred he felt towards his father, the resentment for his situation, everything became a whirlwind in his mind. For an instant, he was caught between what had been and what could be. The memories of his mother looking down on him, his hatred towards his father, Endeavor, everything he had carried for years, and now this boy in front of him, someone who had no quirk, was asking him to be better. Not for others, but for himself and those he wanted to protect. I, he murmured, his voice shaking as his thoughts collided. It was a moment of vulnerability he had never imagined he would share with another, and the internal struggle was evident on his face. But suddenly, he felt the warmth in his left hand. His fire, that power he had rejected for so long, slowly emerged, like a flame seeking life. Todoroki's eyes lit up with the glow of rising fire, a manifestation of his true will, a symbol of his desire to break the chains of his past. "I want to be a better hero than that man." That statement was like a battle cry, and in that instant, the storm inside him began to calm down. Izuku watched in awe as the fire began to engulf Shoto's left half, the orange and red light reflecting his internal struggle, finally calm. It was a stunning sight. The contrast between the ice that still remained and the burning flames symbolized his internal conflict and his decision to embrace all that he was. Watching the fire grow, Midoriya stepped back, his eyes shining with a mix of admiration and respect. Todoroki's transformation was astonishing, and the stadium erupted in cries of wonder and excitement. Incredible, rang through the air, as the crowd began to understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. But there was another scream, one that rose above the rest, filled with despair. It was a sound that wouldn't go unnoticed by Midoriya, but at the moment, everyone was too focused on the battle to pay attention. The murmurs of the crowd intensified, faces illuminated by the light of the flames, each one caught up in the story that was unfolding in front of them. Todoroki was in his own world, his mind clear and focused. The combination of fire and ice represented his true self, a hero who would not let himself be defined by the mistakes of his past. He felt the heat of his fire fill him with energy, empowering him to face his opponent, and the pain of his frostbite on his right half began to subside, bringing unexpected relief. Midoriya, watching from a safe distance, admitted to himself that this was amazing to see, even though he didn't like these kinds of displays of power. And even though his injured arm throbbed with pain, he didn't care. He had complied with his younger sister's request, the words she whispered in his mind echoing loudly, "Help that boy, please, brother, he suffers too." The satisfaction he felt from helping Todoroki, he didn't expect it to bring him joy, a small glimmer of light amidst the chaos of battle. With a slight smile on his face, Midoriya realized something he didn't feel before, even though he didn't feel it. With Todoroki's fire flowing through his body, his right half begins to thaw. Still exhausted, but revitalized by the new energy coursing through his being, he looks up at his opponent, a mix of curiosity and determination. The atmosphere between the two is tense, but something deeper has changed in Shoto, a spark of understanding and acceptance. "Hey," Todoroki says quietly, as the flames surround him, his eyes fixed on Midoriya, "Your sister, what's her name?" Midoriya, surprised by the question, looks him straight in the eyes. "Her name is Eri," he answers, his voice calm but laden with obvious emotional weight. The mere mention of Eri is enough for Midoriya to regain his strength and resolve. She was everything to Izuku, and in that instant, the bond between the three of them felt stronger than ever. "Eri," Todoroki repeats, letting the name hang in the air for a moment, before raising a hand engulfed in flames. "I apologize to Eri for what is about to happen." Without waiting for a response, he prepares for his final, most powerful attack. Fire and ice combine in his fist as he lunges forward. This time, it's not just a burst of rage, it's an attack filled with purpose, as if Todoroki Shoto wants to prove to himself, to Midoriya, and to the world that he has found new strength amidst the chaos. As ice forms beneath his feet and flames flare in his fist, Todoroki knows this will be his final move, a manifestation of everything he's learned in this moment, and everything he's allowed himself to accept. Midoriya, seeing him charge his attack, also prepares himself. Although his gauntlet is destroyed and his arm is damaged, he still has another arm and a gauntlet left on his other hand. He can still fight, he can still make his little sister happy, and he is willing to give everything for her. The fight has reached a point where both are willing to give it their all, but now there is something more than just competition. It is a battle of convictions, of healing, of redemption. With his heart pounding and adrenaline pumping through his veins, Midoriya channels all the energy he can into his gauntlet, feeling every pulse of power. Meanwhile, Todoroki prepares his left arm, channeling all of his fire into a fist, accompanied by his other right half, which freezes everything around it, creating a spectacle of fire and ice. In a precise movement, Todoroki launches a wave of ice that Midoriya dodges by jumping, his eyes fixed on his target. At the same time, Todoroki feels the air around him grow colder, and the heat of his fire intensifies, an internal struggle that mirrors his own personal struggle. Pro-heroes Smentos and Midnight watch in concern and spring into action, creating several concrete walls and a sort of smoke cloud to contain the impending explosion. They know that both young men are about to unleash their full power and are determined to avoid any collateral damage. Todoroki Shoto stares for a moment at his opponent, who is just inches away from approaching, and confused but clear thoughts arise in his mind. "I don't know who you are, or why you said all that, or why you wanted to help me, but thank you, Midoriya Izuku," he muses, feeling a spark of gratitude that mixes with determination. Time seems to stop as both heroes prepare for the final impact. Midoriya, with his gauntlet charged with all energy, ready to release it. Todoroki, feeling the warmth of his fire on one side and the cold of ice on the other, realizes that he is ready to face his true identity. Finally, the two collide, releasing an explosion that mixes fire, ice, and air. The shockwave feels like an earthquake, shaking the stage and making the audience hold their breath. The lights shine brightly, and the heat of the flames is felt on the skin of everyone present, while the ice freezes in midair, creating an astonishing visual spectacle. Sparks and ice shards fly in all directions as the two young men's forces clash in a display of power and emotion, creating a powerful cloud of steam that envelops the stage. This phenomenon, the result of the collision of their abilities, leaves everyone present in a state of expectation, not knowing who has emerged victorious. As the steam begins to clear from the intense clash, silence fills the air, interrupted only by the racing hearts of the spectators. Everyone watches in awe, holding their breath as the scene unfolds before their eyes. Finally, the fog lifts away, revealing the reality of the battle. In the center of the stage, barely visible amid the wreckage of their confrontation, one of the young men lies on the ground, while the other remains standing. The tension is palpable, and the audience feels as if they are on a tightrope, waiting for the verdict. With both gauntlets shattered, circuitry exposed, and parts damaged, Midoriya Izuku lies prostrate on the ground, breathing heavily. His body is covered in wounds and bruises, a testament to the effort and determination he has put into each blow. Despite the pain he feels, his mind is focused on his sister, Eri, wishing that she could be proud of him. On the other hand, his opponent, Todoroki Shoto, stands tall, though not without effort. His left side is exposed, flames still dancing across his skin and clothing burned away. Despite the burns and cold he has faced, there is a look of determination in his eyes. The battle has been more than just a physical confrontation, it has been a fight for his identity and his place in the world. Murmurs begin to run through the crowd as they realize who the contenders are. Shock and awe fill the air, as everyone finally identifies the young heroes who have unleashed such a spectacle. The teachers, Smentos and Midnight, rush to assess the situation. Smentos, concerned about the state of both, is relieved that everything is over and that both students are okay, albeit with minor injuries, while Midnight watches with a mixture of pride and fear, knowing that both have surpassed their own limits. Izuku, Eri shouts from the stands, her voice filled with worry and love, with all the pro-heroes protecting her. The tension is broken for a moment as everyone turns their attention to the fallen young man. The heroine Midnight was about to call the winner. However, before anyone can move, Todoroki turns his gaze to Midoriya, his eyes reflecting the conflict he has just overcome. For the first time in a long time, a genuine smile appears on his face, a smile that speaks of release and acceptance. And the weight of the battle is too much, and in a moment of vulnerability, Todoroki begins to fall to the ground, completely exhausted. But Midoriya begins to get up, through sheer force of will, every fiber of his being screaming in protest due to the pain he feels. With his face drenched in sweat and his heart pounding, he clings to the hope that his efforts have not been in vain, that he did not let his younger sister down. Even in the midst of his exhaustion, there is a glint in his eyes that reflects his unwavering determination, to know that he did something right. As he stands up, the crowd watches in shock, some with eyes filled with tears and others with cries of encouragement. No one could believe what they were witnessing. It was totally impossible, inconceivable, unreal and never seen before. Midoriya Izuku, the boy from the support department, the same one who confessed to not having a quirk, a simple Quirkless, was standing, while Todoroki Shoto, the prodigy of the hero course, son of the number 2 hero, possessor of an excellent quirk, lay on the ground, defeated. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. The boy without a quirk won. Some began to raise their hands, cheering, while others froze, trying to process what they had just witnessed. It was a moment that defied all expectations, an unexpected turn that dismantled preconceived beliefs about strength and courage. Midoriya, despite the pain he felt in every fiber of his being, he stood as a symbol of hope and perseverance, with a smile he didn't realize he had on her face. Deep inside him, the echo of his sister Eri's words resonated, giving him the strength to carry on. Midnight, for her part, stood in the center of the arena, her voice echoing like thunder through the crowd. Todoroki Shoto can no longer continue, therefore, victory belongs to Midoriya Izuku. Those words were more than enough to cause an outburst in everyone present. The air erupted with applause, cheers, and gasps of awe. Excitement spilled over, transforming the venue into a sea of jubilation and euphoria. As the crowd erupted in celebration, Midoriya, stunned by victory, heard none of their praise. He only saw his sister, little Eri, who just moments ago was scared to see her brother in that state. But now, seeing him smile at her, as if he was saying, "Eri, your brother did it," made her give him the best smile of all, one that reflected the love and pride she felt for her brother. Eri, with her eyes shining with admiration, exclaimed, "You did it, brother," and those words were like a balm for his tired heart. As joy filled the air, Midoriya felt a surge of excitement. Pleased to see her happy, he let exhaustion overcome him. His body, which had been pushing beyond its limits, finally gave out, and he fell to the ground, exhausted, but with a triumphant smile on his face. As the attendants began to react, members of the medical team quickly arrived, bringing stretchers to carry both fighters to a place where they could receive care. As he was placed on the stretcher, Midoriya felt the cheers of the crowd slowly fade away. However, in his heart, he carried with him Eri's unconditional support. It was a moment that would seal his resolve to keep going, like a brother who would fight to protect those he loved. On the stretcher next to him, Todoroki was also receiving attention, his face still marked by the effort and determination he had shown. Despite his defeat, there was something different in his gaze, a recognition that he had achieved something significant in this fight. A breakthrough not only in his skill as a hero, but in his connection with someone. Perhaps he had finally met his first friend. As he was carried to the healing room, Midoriya closed his eyes, visualizing Eri's smile. He knew that he had to keep fighting, not for himself, but for her, the only thing he has left in this world that mistreated him and left him behind. And as both heroes were tended to, the crowd continued to cheer, remembering this fight as a defining moment, a moment of change. No one knew it, but in this way change began. In the hearts of those present, in their hopes and dreams, in the vision of what the future might hold for the heroes they so admired. However, oblivious to everything that was happening in the stadium, in the building that belonged to the members of the HPSC agency, a tense atmosphere was brewing behind closed doors. The bright lights of the city reflected the turmoil that had invaded those who were dedicated to ensuring the safety of the world. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the air, and witnesses say someone inside the building threw a television out of the window. The set shattered as it hit the ground, exploding in a shower of glass shards and circuit boards. The scene was as unexpected as it was shocking, and the crowd still celebrating in the stadium turned to look at the sound, bewildered. Inside the building, the tension was palpable. HPSC officials and heroes argued heatedly, frustration building up between them. Todoroki's recent loss to Midoriya had left many completely on edge. "Holy shit, how could this shit happen?" a member of the team shouted, his voice echoing through the room and making the level of frustration that reigned clear. "People need to know that the heroes are up to any expectation, not that our future heroes are being outstanding by a quirkless brat." Ah! The air became tense, filled with reproaches and looks of disbelief. The other members of the team exchanged nervous glances, some nodding in concern while others crossed their arms, unable to process what they had just witnessed in the stadium. The image of Midoriya standing triumphantly while Todoroki lay on the ground continued to throb in their minds like a relentless echo. "This is unacceptable," the man continued, his face flushed with anger. "A boy from the support department shouldn't have had the chance to surpass a student of Todoroki's level. What are we going to tell the public? This is a disaster." The atmosphere grew increasingly thick with the accumulated frustration of everyone present, but, in the midst of the storm, one member of the team raised his voice with determination. "Not all is lost," he said, his tone full of confidence. "We still have Bakugo Katsuki in the competition. His quirk is one of the most powerful and versatile of this generation. He will take care of defeating that disgusting Quirkless." The mention of Bakugo sparked the group's attention. Murmurs of despair turned into a mix of hope and expectation. Some nodded, remembering the blonde boy's impressive feats and fierce competitive spirit. "That's it. Bakugo Katsuki not only has the potential to win, but his determination is unwavering. "He never gives up," said a woman with an approving smile underscore, and we know he's not afraid of anything, much less a boy who doesn't have a quirk. As the tide of pessimism began to fade, another member of the team added, "If Bakugo faces Midoriya, there will be no mercy. He will crush him with all his power. That is what we need. A true hero who will not be intimidated by a lack of skills, he must attack with everything he has." The office room erupted in laughter at the remarkable result, giggling heartily. For his part, the named Bakugo Katsuki, anger was evident on his face as he clenched his fists tightly, his signature explosions crackling in his hands. However, despite his fury, he couldn't hide the wide grin that spread across his face. The outcome of the battle between Midoriya and Todoroki had only inflamed him further. Finally, he muttered, his tone low and heavy with restrained emotion, his eyes shining with a mix of anticipation and overflowing excitement. "I can finally crush that nerd without any restraint." Bakugo's explosive laughter echoed through the halls as his words filled the air, interspersed with the sense of victory still vibrating through the stadium. "Ha ha ha ha, this is going to be absolutely great." Bakugo felt it in every fiber of his being. This was his big chance. He would finally face Midoriya in a no-holds-barred duel, a fight where there would be no limits and no teachers to intervene. And not only that, he would do it with the entire world watching. Every gaze would be fixed on them, every word would echo through the media, and every blow would mark their path to greatness. "I'm going to show everyone who the real #1 hero is," he thought, his cocky grin growing with every second. For Bakugo, this wasn't just a fight. It was his time to prove, not just to the academy, but to the entire country, that he was the best, that no one was a match for him. "I'm the only one worthy of being the next #1 hero." In his mind, Midoriya, or Deku as he had nicknamed him since childhood, was nothing more than an obstacle, a stone in the path that he had to crush in order to achieve glory. Bakugo had always seen him as someone inferior, and now, that inferiority would be exposed in front of everyone. "Deku," he thought, almost savoring victory, "you will be what you have always been, a stepping stone. One more step on my path to becoming the greatest hero." The contempt he felt for his former classmate was mixed with a burning excitement. It didn't matter how many surprises Midoriya had sprung in this tournament, or how many times he had defied the expectations of others. To Bakugo, all of that only made the inevitable moment of Deku's defeat all the sweeter. And most importantly, it would make his victory that much more impactful. "This is my moment," he thought, as he adjusted his combat uniform, feeling the weight of the explosions ready to go off. "I'm going to crush you, Deku, and when I do, everyone will know that I'm the only one capable of being the #1 hero." To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.